show begins.
All right. So welcome everybody to The Leftovers, a special edition where we'll be reviewing Taylor Swift's new Eras Tour. We both were able to catch that last night. VIP access, front row seats. Hassan, what were your thoughts on the show?
I think she's incredible.
She is.
What a generational talent.
Unbelievable.
And the best we got in America.
She is the best of us. In actuality, we're going to be discussing the conflict between Israel and Gaza that's happening right now. Obviously, there's been a lot of emotional, charged stuff going on.
Don't cuck out, Ethan.
But we're going to discuss everything. But I do want to make something very clear at the top of the show here, is that I've seen a lot of people expecting us to come froth and argue, and our friendship is going to end, and the show is going to end, or something like that. And I'm sorry to disappoint you guys, but that's definitely not what we're planning on doing here. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. Instead, we're going to solve the conflict in its entirety. Let's go.
It's never going to happen.
That's what we're going to do. People
who are like, it's just not happening. That's not the point of the show, which I like, and actually it's becoming more so now, is that we can have. I sound so dumb and corny, but like we can have difficult conversations and not hate each other, which is important because
taboo topics.
Exactly, just like who's doing that?
I think that was Fresh and Fit.
Fresh and Fit, taboo topics.
No, it was Ab and Preach, I think.
Look, if people like me and Hassan, which are basically so close to the same ideals, can't have a amicable
let's be real. Hassan is not
about it, then there's
the
no
same.
hope for anybody.
Hassan is a fucking grifter.
I agree.
Thanks.
The hummus.
Where do you want to get started? Because one thing I do want to say, and this is not necessarily about this issue in particular, but in general, I feel like a lot of people do not have a way to contextualize news and information without adding a little bit of drama seasoning to it.
Oh, like you.
Like, it's not necessarily...
He does this all the time.
This is my opinion on it. It's always... there needs to be a secondary market, you know? Of like, oh, well, Ethan said this. Or
you do
Hassan
that all the
that.
time. He fucking does this all the time.
Oh
what
my
a fucking
God,
idiot.
they're going to fall apart.
Oh my God.
Like, I think that betrays the values that you are trying to show people. If you're saying like, I care about people dying, I don't want them to die.
What sort of values is cheering the deaths of innocent people?
And then you simultaneously try to have discussions almost entirely around commentators and Twitter spats and whatnot. I feel like that is unproductive.
Right, and actually people are doing that to both of us.
Calling your audience members bloodthirsty neo-Nazis.
There's this one video that I saw on our subreddit, and I see it on Twitter too. It's getting a lot of likes and views. It's so fucking bananas. I
have not even watched it.
So
I just saw it and I was like, oh God.
They spliced me talking separately about something and Hassan talking separately about something, and they spliced it together to make it look like I was telling you that you deserve to die. Here, let me see it.
Jesus.
No, look at the title of it. It goes, debate. Ethan Klein tells his former co-host, Hassan Piker, he deserves to be burned alive by terrorists for his different views on the Israel-Palestine conflict. Die! And by the way, we got a community note on it.
That's leftists in Hassan's
Thank
audience.
You. 1.5 million views, though. But anyway.
Just so we're clear. These are all buddies.
But that goes to show you.
Doing that too on the one thing that pisses me off is people who are cutting shit that is like trying to make it sound like I said that if you're pro-Palestine, you deserve to die, which is fucking
nuts. They're cowards.
Clearly,
they can't tell the truth.
Clearly cut.
They're so comfortable with lying.
And I've seen people doing the same to you.
Here's why they're doing that. Okay? Here's why they're doing that to you specifically. Because you're Jewish, you lived in Israel.
Oh, stop.
And Ela was, of course, a mandatory conscript. Also being an Israeli citizen, so people don't know what your perspective is, and
That's
immediately
their fault.
say,
They should not jump
okay,
to conclusions.
you
but
want all
you encourage
Palestinians
your
to die.
audience to do shit like this,
You
Hassan.
want
You
Israel
fucking
to
snake.
ethnically cleanse the Gaza Strip and ethnically displace in the West Bank. I don't believe that that's your perspective, and
You don't
I've never.
believe it? It's not.
No, I know that that's not your perspective. I'm
Just
saying
to be
that
totally
like
clear about that.
yes, but
Now
I think that
what?
it's important for you to clarify, and then I can clarify my
doesn't have to
position as well because
clarify
a lot of people,
shit.
despite the
It's
fact that
the onus
I
on
know
Hassan's
that I
audience
have
to
to be on
actually
a very
research people.
delicate
Instead of going to
tightrope
clips
when
on
discussing
fucking Reddit
these
and
matters
fucking,
because it does often get racialized fairly quickly, and it's done as a deliberate attempt to try to misconstrue your position.
Mind you,
and
Hassan
debate a
has
straw man.
very
I
cleverly
think that,
weaved in enough
you can,
anti-Semitism
describe
into
your
his
position
own
and we
content
can go forward.
to enable
Another thing to
Ethan
note,
being
it is
attacked.
incredible how many people want this show to break up. Like they're fantasize about it.
Yeah.
And
No,
I find
no,
that
they
odd.
want you to
I
get
find
away
that
from
odd.
Hassan before he
it's what I just described.
jeopardizes
I know,
your
I know.
career.
It's drama.
Like,
There's no
That's
way to
what people
contextualize the
want.
news because news is fucking boring and oftentimes it's depressing, right? When you see dead babies, when you see fucking building blocks being reduced to rubble, that shit is one, usually impossible to contextualize if you're living in like fucking
How is it
Connecticut,
impossible
you know what
to
I mean?
contextualize?
And
It's visually
and
in
two,
front of you. Stop
it's depressing and boring.
infantilizing people.
What's not boring is, well, this is my favorite commentator duking it out with my favorite commentator in a way that I can actually analyze, in a way that I can actually understand, and I'm gonna go to battle.
oh, by the way, chat is off. You fucking savages in chat. Got to pipe down today. It's time to sit down and listen, right?
Sit
Dan?
down and listen.
So here, I won't interrupt you. I think it's good to clarify your position.
Let me clarify.
He
Thank
doesn't
you.
have to
clarify
clarify
your position
anything.
on Israel
He's
and
made his
Palestine in general.
position
Well, first of all,
clear.
just to talk about
What
this
the
clip
fuck?
that I guess some people have seen.
Fucking
I made an
losers.
analogy. You might not disagree with it. My point was that, you know what, I don't need to explain that.
No, you don't
Do I?
have to explain anything.
I don't know what the clip is, but I care more about you getting your point across.
He
Yeah,
got his
here.
point
As it
across.
pertains
There's
to,
nothing to fucking explain.
to Israel and Palestine. Like,
Yeah.
'cause
Here's what I'll say. And I like to say this at the top because people are always going to call me a Zionist. People are going to call me a IDF supporter, genocidal,
Fuck
all
those
this shit.
people.
And I've been saying it every fucking day, every time I
Fuck
can say it.
them.
So if you see anybody saying that, you know they're liars and bad faith weirdos. So here's what I'll say about Israel, okay? Listen. This isn't the first time I've said it, and I'll say it many more times. The cabinet is run by genocidal maniacs, okay?
Which he
They're
has
led
said
by
repeatedly.
Netanyahu, who should resign in disgrace and go to prison for being a war criminal, okay? He's made a coalition of the most like radically conservative freaks that don't represent, by the way, the majority of Israelis. And they're hell-bent on genocide, frankly, overtly.
Yes. Yes.
They've committed tons of war crimes in Gaza,
Why this needs to be
including the killing
explained.
of children, obviously, because Gaza is one of the most densely populated places in the world. 50% of the residents are under 18, so when you bomb a building, the chances that you're killing children is pretty much 100%. Okay? It's fucking barbaric. It's unacceptable. It's disgusting. I've seen videos, you know, I saw videos of Palestinian dads holding his dead like 5-year-old daughter. I mean,
Mind you, the representative for Palestine that's currently
and then
giving
there was another
interviews
one
in the
that, like-
UK was on air when his extended family was killed by an Israeli
as a
bomb.
father, it's even hard to talk about.
So,
This
you
dude was
know,
holding his infant. It was like a year old.
see, and Ethan shouldn't have to do this. This is unnecessary. This is what the cowards in Hassan's community have brought Ethan to. Okay, he shouldn't have to break
He was
down
like
on
patting
air.
her on the back and saying like his final goodbye. I mean, he's holding her like she's alive, like he's just burping her or something. I didn't expect to get emotional about that, but like, I'm a new dad, and that shit really fucks me up.
Now, mind you, that's where Ethan is coming from, too. People who don't have children don't understand what this is like.
I think people in Israel that support the government and the government need to watch that shit. I think Israel shutting off water, power, and food to Gaza is insane. It doesn't even make sense.
It's like, war crimes. It's what the Nazis did to the Jews.
I wanna cut in here for a second.
Is literally a Nazi.
And while you recollect your thoughts and say something, the feelings that you are demonstrating here, and the empathy that you're demonstrating and showing towards Palestinians, is unfortunately not represented by our administration, and it's not represented by our media. And I think that the irony is that in the aftermath of the
let's see if he does JQ shit.
The Palestinian the Palestinian actions in southern towns in Israel, led by Hamas. The reaction from the Israeli population, specifically anti-Zionists living in Israel who are Jewish, and
mind
even
you, those
Zionists
are the people that got
living
killed
in Israel,
too, by the way. The people in southern Israel
more tempered
are not Zionists.
And more empathetic to the plight of Palestinians, and truly understood that the violence of this occupation and the violence of an apartheid regime and the violence of endless bombing campaigns in an open-air prison was squarely at the heart of the violence that Israelis experienced on October 7th. I think that is very courageous for people living in Israel proper who lost their friends to come out and speak out against their own government immediately.
And to be clear, that's a lot more of Israelis than the media is letting you see.
And disgusting for Americans who are thousands of miles away, who will never be impacted by this,
here we
to refuse to reckon with that and to continue demanding more blood,
right? Because that's
and
all that Americans do,
with
right?
An insanely unpopular, insanely reactionary, far-right government who has deliberately propped up Hamas as the singular force time and time again, who has humiliated, bullied, imprisoned, and occupied and stolen the lands of so many innocent Palestinians. And it is shocking to me that the consensus in Israel is more tempered.
And that's what pisses me off.
Why are you shocked?
In American media.
Why are you
I've seen
shocked?
way too many fucking people acting like all
people
Israelis
in Israel
don't
want the occupation to happen.
They're all genocidal. Like, there's
what is there not to understand?
Dehumanization of Israelis and the refusal to see, like, even
understand
their perspective at all. Like, if you can't understand why, after Hamas murdered up to now probably close to 2,000 people, if you don't understand why Israel would want to retaliate, then you're not in favor of peace. You're not, because I understand, and a lot of Israelis understand why Hamas exists and why Palestinians and Gazans want to fucking kill Israelis. I understand that, and I have that empathy. I feel that a lot of people, not all, even a minority, but enough that it's noticeable, don't have that level of empathy where they see Israelis as like full-blown, diverse human beings that aren't fucking genocidal freaks.
Bingo.
You know what I mean? They just happen to be on the side that has a bigger fucking military and has international support.
And Hassan is to blame for some of this, by the way.
The result of that is obviously that a ton of Palestinians die.
I think
Like how's there ever going to be peace? Like genuinely, if there's not empathy to at least understand. Like I'm not to agree with, but to at least understand.
And to be clear, that empathy would be there if Hamas didn't kill civilians.
Edward Said
this was a push in the real wrong direction. This has exacerbated things so much worse than they should be.
It's not even necessarily about designification of Israel. It's about maintaining peace so that everyone has a right to return and be able to live comfortably in their own homes.
The problem is
this area of
that
historic
peace
Palestine
on that level is
did
never
have
going
Jews,
to
Christians,
exist.
and Muslims living side by side before the 1948 Nakba and before the British occupation.
To be clear,
there was
prior to that,
there was a time where there was
were attacked
peaceful
numerous
coexistence.
times and many times pushed out of the country.
Ultimately, though,
just so we're clear,
I think that the reason
Zionist
why a lot
Jews
of
aren't
people
the
get
only
really
people that have
passionate
done
about this, or the reason why I think the American media does a disservice to show the full breadth of the conflict or even the Israeli perspective by regularly running to the right of the Israeli government. That is, I think, by design.
There is enough media out there
we give a
that
lot
if
of
people
money
did
to
their
Israel
due diligence,
for its
you could
security
see
and its
the other
defensive
side.
operations,
People
as we call it.
choose not to.
And I think a lot of that money
And
has to be justified
Hassan's
to the
own
eyes of the
rhetoric on
American
his own
population.
stream makes it seem like
that
every
is,
Israeli
those are our weapons
is out to
ultimately
commit
that are being
genocide.
used and being
Okay,
deployed.
I'm sorry.
It's our training as well.
Him and his ilk paint everybody that he's opposed to
for
as
Lockheed
murderous,
Martin,
bloodthirsty,
Raytheon,
racist,
Northrop Grumman, Boeing, and
homophobic,
many other defense
sexist, murderous
contractors
people.
who saw
all the
tremendous
time.
gains in their on their stocks immediately after October 7. So
guess who else owns
people
a
do
ton
not
of
have
stocks
empathy for
in
Israel. I don't
weapons
necessarily
companies?
agree with. I think I think your judgment is made on what you see on Twitter. You're like, there's an unimaginable amount of violence that took place in Israel, and then how can people immediately go to defend Palestinians in this action? And it's
Not
understandable.
Palestinians.
Well, I mean, people
Just
were
to be clear.
Yeah. Immediately go to defend these actions in general, and it's because emotions are high in that moment. But I don't think
it's not just emotions.
I do not think that Western
it is a
media
level
across
of rhetoric
the board
that's been getting a lot worse lately.
Gives a similar perspective.
It's people
one
that learn
you
that they
have
think a revolution
on the Palestinian plight. I don't think that is
will be
represented in the
bloodless.
media.
It's
They
worth
crave
saying
this
the
type of
Western
shit.
media refuses to humanize Gaza. Okay, like that's the same thing.
It is by design.
And so,
not all Western media. Let's be clear.
It's just people. I'd like people to have. Let me finish what I was saying, and then you can kind of clarify your spot.
Go ahead.
I don't understand the water and power and food being shut off. Like that makes no fucking sense.
It's a
What's
literal
the end goal
Nazi
there, other than
tactic.
just to let people die?
That's
like
the
hospitals
point,
don't have
Ethan.
power. Respirators are
That's
turning
the
off.
point. It's ethnic
surgeries
cleansing.
are being canceled.
Red Crescent paramedics were bombed yesterday after being allowed into the area to take care of people that were stuck inside of the rubble.
And
they
that
died.
is the IDF.
Nine
IDF.
Nine UN officials have died so far. Multiple journalists have died so far. It's relentless, and it is chaotic. It is ethnic cleansing, and every single media operative in the United States and in the Western world, and the majority of our politicians have championed it.
I was watching the Israeli news with Ela this morning, and she was translating it for me on the news. They were saying the strategy is to get in as much bombing as possible before the international community makes them stop.
Yes, that's what they do.
How
That's what
fucked
they
up
do
and
every
cynical is
time.
that?
Well, yeah.
But they
They
just
did that in
openly said that, right,
Lebanon.
Ela?
Why is this
like
something
news
new?
anchors, like speculating about the situation and all giving their thoughts. It's not an official
It's an analysis.
government or IDF telling their
It is an IDF tactic.
They're all speculating and they were saying how
Zionists literally learned this from what the Germans did to the Jews.
Before
it is the same
the humanitarian cause there is going to be so bad that everyone will tell Israel, you guys need to stop. So some of the citizens are actually upset because they want them to respond harsher.
Right. It's crazy. That's crazy. You know, I want to say this about settlers in the West Bank are religious zealots. They're monsters. They're genocidal, fucking fundamental monsters. They are also, I would even say, you know, settlers, they're participating in this dangerous conflict.
Yeah, and notice, they didn't go after the West Bank settlers.
And they're putting
Those
themselves
are the people
in this
that should have
dangerous
been...
place. Now, I want to make it clear just while I'm on this point, the people who were murdered outside of Gaza were not settlers. Those were normal motherfucking people living normal lives.
They were regular people.
Living on kibbutz and like communes, fucking communes.
Unarmed
living like
people
a peaceful life
that were
with their
slaughtered.
families. They were not settlers. Settlers are involved in this war, I believe.
There used to be settlers in Gaza. The military had to forcibly remove them from
removed.
Gaza so they could completely shut it off and begin sieges whenever they felt like mowing the lawn.
So, and anyway, the Israeli government enables the settlements.
Yep.
They encourage it
Against agreements that
with
they
the
have
express
made
purpose
with
of
the UN,
erasing Palestinian
with
land
other
and making
Arab
peace
nations, they continue to
near
do this. And
as
the world
impossible
has
as they can.
The biggest failure of this is the international
there's something
community
important to
lets
mention
this go
here,
on.
important
They
to acknowledge
keep letting
here.
this go on.
I think that that what you just described, especially in the West Bank, which is settler terrorism, at least according to international law, and
Not just settler
it's fully
terrorism, it's
understood to be
government-backed
an illegal
terrorism.
occupation, demands constant military support.
Yes.
Because you cannot,
And that's
over the
why
course
Hamas
of
was able
75
to do
years,
this.
build
The
settlements
military was dragged
and
over
act
to the
like
West
you are
Bank
turning a
to
blind eye
defend
to it, maybe
illegal
sometimes halt it,
settlements.
maybe sometimes continue those operations of building said settlements, bulldoze homes, build roads that specifically partition off areas where Palestinians are supposed to be living on their own land in the two-state solution that that has been reaffirmed time and time again.
And to be clear, there's
you
not going to be a two-state solution.
You can't have that be your peaceful coexistence project and not recognize that of course Palestinians see that and think, okay, well, what the fuck are we supposed to do? There's no Hamas in the West Bank, and yet the Palestinian Authority is like collaborating with Israeli security operations, giving up 14-year-olds that were throwing rocks and shit like that. While they're losing their land, they're losing their homes. The area, according to B'Tselem, which is an Israeli organization, the area of West Bank of all of the agricultural land and all of the partitioned off lands that have been expanded into through settler terrorism, which is completely illegal, went from like 10% in 1967 to more than 75%.
And the international
the areas that are
community, the
partitioned
UN,
off
let
also have
this
no
happen.
contiguity, which means that, like, if you are Palestinian living in your own home in the West Bank, in order to get to your uncle's house, for example, you have to go through a multitude of IDF checkpoints. There are 2 separate license plates given to Palestinians living in the West Bank versus
Literal
Israelis
Nazi
living in the West
tactics.
Bank. And I think many brave and very intelligent and very empathetic Jewish activists have talked about this in far better terms than I have. But one that comes to mind immediately is Gabor Mate, a Holocaust survivor and a very famous physician, very famous doctor, where he said it best. He said he has friends that live in America and Palestinians that live in Canada that cannot return to their homes in the West Bank, that cannot return to their homes in even Israel proper, their family homes. And yet, his friends, if regardless of whether or not they've ever lived in Israel, or regardless of whether or not where they're from around the world, can go to Israel and go specifically to West Bank and be able to sit on top of Palestinian land and own that land. That is horrifying. That is impossible to come to terms with. And I think that violence is a necessity in the maintenance of such a structure, which now many NGOs and even former officials, Israeli officials are considering
Israel's
is an
final
apartheid.
idea
And
is
it has
genocide.
been for some
They
time now.
want to remove every Palestinian from Israel.
Of course,
it's
that
not
violence
just structural violence.
is going to
it's
that
ethnic
violence
elimination.
that Palestinians endure on a daily basis is going to create more reactionary forces within it. This is something that I have said about the invasion of Afghanistan and the invasion of Iraq. And this is something that I even said about Russia invading Ukraine, is that more reactionary forces are going to be seen as the emancipatory forces when an irredentist power or an imperialist power goes and tries to seize land that it does not own. This is the second part of
to be clear,
the brutality of the occupation
to
that
parse
has
the difference between
made it seem as though Palestinians have no choice.
Organizations
that has created no opportunities for
freedom
them.
Fighters
That
don't
has led
kill
to
civilians.
Hamas being able to seize
Hamas
more and
is
more
a terrorist
power.
organization. It's not
after
freedom
being
fighters.
democratically elected
He
one time in
refuses to acknowledge
2006,
this.
pretty much.
Right. And I do want to make clear that, again, as we talk about settlers and all this shit, that settlers are not the same as regular Israeli civilians. And I think, you know, having been
Hassan will not say this.
Actually, a lot of them are American.
Yeah, they are the most. Yeah. They are. My friend Noah Colwyn calls this the zealotry of the convert, where he. I was talking to him yesterday. He's a former editor-in-chief of Jewish Currents. I think he was editor-in-chief. He still is a contributing editor, we were talking about like the most reactionary, the most violent activity often comes from the likes of Baruch Goldstein, right? An American Israeli who went in I believe 1993 into a mosque and shot and killed 29 Palestinians who were praying during prayer. A person that was hailed as a hero by the current minister of the current administrator of the entirety of the Israeli police force, Itamar Ben-Gvir. Itamar Ben-Gvir and Benjamin Netanyahu are incredibly far-right politicians that now control the Israeli government.
Nazis. They are Jewish Nazis.
The last time that there was any kind of negotiation between Palestinians in good faith, between a person who was still a Zionist, like Yitzhak Rabin, they killed him. And the people that called for his assassination, like Ben-Gvir, are now in positions of power in Israel to show you how much the attitudes and the governance has changed over the course of the past 3 decades in Israel.
I want to say that I agree, and a lot of people in Israel do. It's disgusting, the people that are there right now in power. And if I can add something about the settlers, that's another point of frustration for a lot of Israelis. They send the soldiers to protect them.
Ethan's wife. She
soldiers
comes
that
from
had
Israel.
to put their life on hold because the IDF is mandatory.
Understands this. So
They're
does
just
Ethan.
18-year-old, they're children. They have to go and protect the settlers. The settlers don't go to the IDF. Orthodox people don't serve in the IDF.
Fucking nice.
Yeah, this is
insane.
Literal Nazis.
Hold on.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm done.
No,
I was going to say that the amount of people that don't know that I've seen that IDF is mandatory service is crazy. Hila is not serving the IDF ideologically because she wants to fucking kill Gazans or whatever bullshit people always say about her. It's mandatory conscription. It's mandatory. Every Israeli has to
That's why there's
serve.
organizations such as IDF Veterans Against the Occupation that are very that are organizations that I rely on when making assessments on what's going on the ground in Israel as well. And here's the thing: Yeah, this is a relatively controversial perspective. It's just that the official government attitude has oftentimes, or at all, as a matter of fact, ever reflected any kind of attitude within the Israeli population, as it has
And that needs to be
either
made very clear.
deliberately
The
or
sentiment of
in
the Israeli
secret
population is
continued
not the same as the
settler
government.
expansion
The government
protocols
has been co-opted
since
by an extremely right-wing group
since
of people.
1967
It
especially.
is as if Matt
So,
Walsh and Ben Shapiro ran America.
that is
literally.
That's basically burning the candle on both ends. Okay? On the one hand, you're telling Palestinians, hey, if you collaborate with us, we are still going to have these psychotic American settlers come to your uncle's house and take it away from you, bulldoze your house, partition your neighborhoods, okay, and set up a two-tier checkpoint system that B'Tselem calls, like I said, the permit regime,
Literal Nazi
and
shit, by
constantly
the way.
harass you. They can spit on you, and if they spit on you, the IDF's official protocol in that situation is to defend the settlers. They're not there to defend the Palestinians. Like, they might in certain instances, but overwhelmingly their job there is to specifically defend the settlers.
And again, like Hila was touching on, you're sending young men out in harm's way to protect these provocateur, fucking religious zealots, radicals. And again, like Elis, the irony being that they don't even need to serve the military. I mean, it's a fucking joke.
Yeah.
So I think that it's especially important for people to keep in mind that Israel is so far from a monolith. It's
Thank you.
like people need to understand that, and that people need to
Hassan does a
understand
really
that
horrible
we're not
job
all
of conveying
guilty of
that
the
to
crimes
his
of our
audience.
government. Because if that was the case, heaven would be empty at the end of the day. I mean, this was the analogy I was making. If you're American, you know, and if we're gonna blame the citizens of Israel and say they're all, you know, and some people have been saying this, and I have clips that I want to watch later, saying that all Israelis are occupiers in fair game, and deserve to die, essentially. If you're willing to say that, then if like a terrorist
Mind
cell
you, Hassan was
comes
on a
to a
podcast with,
fucking neighborhood in
what's his
LA
name?
and wants to do revenge for the
Second
million
Thought?
Iraqis that the
You know, the
American
guy that,
government
you know,
murdered
reviews
during
his
that war,
expensive
then you're
cars
telling
and
me you
claims
would
to
have
be
no
a, you know,
problem with these terrorists coming and killing
pro-socialist,
everybody you know?
Literally said
I
that
mean,
there
you are
are
sitting
no
next to
innocent
someone who
people
said
in
America
Israel.
deserved
None of them are
9/11, by the way.
civilians.
Okay, well, how would you
I want to
feel?
let you know.
How would you feel if people were blaming you for the Iraq war and coming and killing your fucking children and your grandma and your parents and your friends and your family, burning your house down, burning people alive?
I don't disagree with you on you know, civilian casualties. I think that
He does, though.
ultimately
He does.
we have a moral
He does.
obligation
He
to
tacitly
speak out against
skims
our
over
government
this.
and do everything we physically can to stop that kind of bloodshed. I agree. And I think that plenty of Americans at least kind of recognize that this is a war machine that they cannot stop anymore. So my goal at least is to get people to not champion it. And the same goes for Israeli action, the Israeli government's actions specifically, just like the American government's action. Because at the end of the day, what I want and what I believe many of my friends who are Palestinian advocates and activists and Israeli activists as well on the ground, what they all want is peaceful coexistence.
Not all of them.
Peaceful coexistence will never be achieved as long as governments can behave in whichever way they want, especially as it comes to blood and soil propaganda and the consequences of that propaganda
Mind
being,
you, Hassan
you know,
comes
blood
from
and soil
Turkey,
actions.
one of the most hyper-nationalist countries
same
in the
with
world.
America.
Go look up what
Same with
his
Israel.
country
I
has
think
done
that
to the Kurds.
Israelis, and again, I hope that you'll see where they're coming from when you say they're cagey, they're paranoid, they're scared, and they feel threatened constantly.
Yes.
And so when Israelis see a ton of leftists talking about,
Bingo.
go Hamas, cheering on Hamas, or saying like super hyperbolic shit about like civilians are all settlers, or or saying shit like, listen, it's a revolution. What do you expect? Like, what is a revolution supposed to look like? Or whatever of all of these qualifiers.
Yes, that's
basically
the
that people want to make.
Audience,
the Israelis see that, and they say, oh, these people just fucking hate us. They just want to kill everybody. That's why we're going to vote for these scumbags.
I don't think that the people that vote for those scumbags are motivated by like some random Twitter person being like, "This is a revolution."
It's a feeling that people get. It's not a random tweet.
Yeah. So
hold on. Go ahead. Go ahead, Hila.
I want to say Ethan is right, and so many people in Israel just feel like it's an existential threat. It's just this. Everybody wants us dead.
Because
that's
no
how
matter
we grow up.
how much appeasement you
all
give,
of our borders,
there's
they all
always
want
going
us
to
dead.
be elements
Rockets are always coming over. And again,
it is the Hamas
that's your
doctrine.
life. You're under threat all the time.
You can end the occupation in
and it's
Gaza
important to say this is not about right
Hamas
or wrong. It's about having empathy for the Israeli experience.
They don't
and how
see that as
and like,
enough.
and it's not about right and wrong. I have to say that. I have to emphasize that. It's got nothing to do with that. Okay? It's about understanding their perspective. And knowing that when you have these super, accepting views on violence and revolution and all this shit towards Israelis, it's not one tweet that people see, Hassan. It's all the shit people see over the years all the time. And it causes them to act irrationally.
Okay. I think that you bring up a really good point about paranoia. The reason why, well, first of all, I mean, we don't have to get into like the history of why Jewish people would be understandably paranoid and worried, considering how they have historically been singled out as villains every single fucking time, from blood libels and pogroms all the way to the Holocaust. So
and so you would understand it's hard for some people to distinguish. No, I know you do, but 100%. I'm just saying this. I'm just saying this.
100%.
You might understand how it's hard for some people to distinguish anti-Semitism between like criticism, especially when it's like a criticism that's very lax on violence against Israelis.
So you're absolutely correct on that front. Here's what I will even dive into further, and this is something I talked about on my stream as well. The paranoia now that manifests inside of Israel, as far as I understand, like I don't live in Israel. I've never been to Israel.
Maybe you should go.
Is, at least from everything that I have read on not just Israel, but also apartheid South Africa and the Algerian anti-colonial action against the French and numerous other formations of occupation and the emancipatory struggle there, the paranoia manifests and becomes a part of your identity because of the violence that is a necessity for the maintenance of apartheid. Because it's, of course, it's almost the same
Israel
as, like,
was under
Americans
threat
being very
before
violent
all this
people.
shit happened. I mean,
what's up?
From the moment Israel was established, the neighbors were trying to kill them.
Well, I mean, I don't know if we agree on that. I will say that I think that Nakba was an unjustifiable act of violence that was the formation of the state. Now, you can say every state is formed through an act of violence. All enclosures are defended through acts of violence,
and to
certainly.
Be honest, the British
but
are
I
to
think
blame
that
for this more than
there
the
was,
Israelis are.
You know, this extends, like what you say to West Bank, what you say about West Bank settlers was the original position of the Israeli state's formation. And this does not, in current day, justify like random Israeli children that are born inside of Israel proper to be considered enemy combatants. I agree
But
with you there
Hassan
100%.
was on a podcast
because
with
that is
people
not
that
problem
literally
solving.
said that.
That is looking for vengeance. However, if we are to say
weasel.
that like Israel from its development, like in its inception, has always been under the threat of violence from other nations, bordering nations, certainly, sure, but Israel's formation was a violent one.
But let's just be real. Here, let's be practical. I'm talking to the Israeli psyche.
Yeah.
Okay? Like,
The Jewish paranoia,
you know,
supersedes the
1973,
Nakba.
every bordering
It
Arab state
precedes
wanted
it.
to just
World War II,
coalesce to
hello?
destroy Israel. Okay? Like, this is ingrained in the Israeli psyche, this kinds of shit. And even back then in 1970, people were just born there. You know what I mean? And again, I'm not even saying right or wrong. I'm saying it's important to empathize with the Israeli experience if you ever want to achieve peace. Because otherwise, the only other option is one side kills the other side completely.
Yes.
That's the only end to this, otherwise.
And the side that's going to kill the other side completely is not going to be the Palestinian side. That's the point. Like, that's never...
No.
I don't think that is ever
Hassan,
going
you're
to happen.
missing
I don't
it.
even
You're
I don't
missing
even
it.
believe that is
Not the Palestinians
legitimately
that are
what
the threat.
every single Palestinian wants either. Just like I don't believe that's what Israelis want across the board.
I'm not saying anybody wants that. I'm saying that's what the peace that they're working towards when they don't have the ability to empathize with the enemy. You don't see them as human beings.
Bingo.
They're never going to fucking see you as human beings either.
I know,
you're
but
never going to meet in the middle. And they'll
you
never
recognize
be...
that the same goes for, like...
I'm talking about both sides, man.
Yeah, I think that I agree with you that dehumanization does occur, but I also believe that one side does still hold all of the power, and that is the side that is the state that has been backed by the entirety of the Western world, that gets that has an incredible security apparatus that for the first time ever in 50 years was actually shattered, which is why I think there's like a lot of fear internally inside of Israel and a lot of anger towards the security candidate Benjamin Netanyahu specifically. But overall, it is.
And it's because of the dehumanization on the Arab side
Israel's conflict to end. You know what I mean?
Hila, you were trying to say something.
Can I add that my generation's grandparents are people that survived the Holocaust.
Yep.
And they escaped to Israel to start a country for Jewish people because they were, we all know the Holocaust. They were all, butchered. And
that's the problem with
what happened
this in a condensed time period.
Is
People
a
think
really
this is like 100
scary
years
reminder
old. It's
to
not.
all of us
It is
Jewish
recent
people.
history.
And that's how I feel, at least, that it's a reminder. The Holocaust wasn't that long ago.
Thank you.
And every year on Holocaust Day, the thing they tell you is never forget. You always have to tell the stories to everybody about what happened at the Holocaust. And it's always like something taken for granted for me. You just grow up and you're like, yeah, Holocaust Day, it happened. We all get it. But what happened this time is really scary, and it really does bring up this topic. And
see, I don't think that you can even say something like that without starting a debate, and I don't think that's right.
I think the reason why people would react to it, or even myself, as a matter of fact, will react to that is because
Hassan will literally say, "So what?"
You're absolutely correct, and your feelings are totally valid.
It's not just about
what is happening
feelings.
currently
it's a reality. It was a material reality for Jewish people.
Ongoing, at least 75-year campaign of ethnic displacement upon people who had nothing to do with the Holocaust.
Yes, it was wrong.
And that is, and
dude, we're just talking about the Israeli psyche. I don't.
No, I understand.
So what is it you're saying though? Like we all know that, but we have to be real about how we interpret everybody's suffering. Everybody is like, bro, you don't know how crazy it was. Like we were listening to the news on the day it happened, live, and families are calling in whispering. The terrorists are killing their children in front of them, burning people alive in safe houses. Shit, you know what I mean? Shooting babies with AK-47s. And so I'm just saying, like, it's important to empathize with how a Jewish person or
Hassan thinks
specifically an
that's
Israeli
justified. He won't
might
have the
feel
balls to
hearing
say it,
these
but he
phone calls.
believes that.
There are kids that survived because they were laying under their dead parents' bodies, and they laid there for hours, the whole day, and that's how they survived. And the last time we heard stories like that was at the Holocaust.
And I'm not saying it's not about right or wrong. It's just about like having the empathy to understand your quote
really
enemy,
wants to escape
to understand the perspective.
aggravating the
And I'm
people
not
he
asking
associates with,
Gazans necessarily even
"This was
to
an overstep,
be like,
this was a
oh well, I
mistake."
appreciate what they're going through. I'm talking
Because
about like
it was. This was a
people
huge
who want to
fucking
fucking debate it all day
This
long.
is going to set back
and
any
you
chance
know
of peace
this stuff
by, like,
does
20
influence
years,
people. The demonstrations you see out there that happen like immediately afterwards. These people have an effect on attitudes around the world.
Yeah.
I don't think that they have any say or any effect on
bullshit.
the Western
You fucking
world's
liar.
united defense of Israel.
It affects
they immediately
anti-Semitism, and it affects how people treat Jews, and
Yes.
it normalizes, by the way, treating Israelis like animals.
Yes.
I don't believe that we should treat Israelis like animals. And
please. No,
one
he
thing
does.
that
He does.
that you have,
He's
I
called
think,
Israelis
that many
bloodthirsty
people
animals.
do
He
not
hasn't parsed between
is
the government
experiences
and the
that you
people.
mentioned
He's literally said
as
all
far as
Israelis
children
are
hiding under their parents'
bloodthirsty
bodies is
animals, literally.
in this very fucked up way, identical to the existence of people living in Gaza every single day under brutal fire from a much more superior military force. The reality is that most of the Western world, not only does not see that, but also immediately rushes to equate people saying free Palestine across the board in an unflinching way to a defense of Hamas or Hamas operations and whatnot. Are there people who do defend Hamas? Certainly.
There are a lot
but
of
ultimately,
people.
the overwhelming majority of activists that I know, the Haaretz editorial board,
here he goes.
and
He's
the
gonna
perspective
gloss
of
over
like
this.
Shin Bet officials that say that
Ethan,
Israel's
go after him for
actions
being on
in
the
the West
podcast
Bank
with
is
Second
becoming
Thought.
a security
Ask him what he thinks
risk
about what Second Thought
because
said.
it is
Don't let
radicalizing
him get away with
Palestinians
this. What
into
the fuck?
taking an incredibly anti-Israel posture. Former Mossad members, former Shin Bet officials united in saying the same exact thing.
It's not
these terrorist attacks
Israel
do the
positions.
same. They
Anti-Israeli
radicalize
government
Israelis.
positions.
Of course, I understand that violence begets violence. That is a constant, no matter what. So what we have to remember is who holds the power to scale it back. Who holds the power
and what
to
happens
stop
every
the
time
violence?
you scale it back?
I
when you
think
engage
a lot
in
of people do
appeasement
know
and
that
then you
and
get
remember
attacked.
Yeah, and so when people say that
when people outside the country,
this
the
violence
Egyptian
that
president
occurred
was
in
assassinated
Israel
for
proper
making a deal with Israel.
directly
Literally.
a consequence of the
The
brutal
Muslim
apartheid
Brotherhood
regime
assassinated
and
the
the conditions
president
that
of
it set
Egypt
forth
for being a
Palestinian
compromiser.
people.
Statement that I agree with.
Yeah.
For being
So
a
when they say
traitor
that,
to
you're
the
saying that
Arab world.
people equate
Literally.
that with like a defense of Hamas.
How do you
No,
appease
that is
that?
not what I'm saying.
There are people
That is not what I'm saying.
there are Gazan
Just to be
people.
totally clear, dude.
There are Palestinian Authority people. There are people in Gaza that are not Hamas at all, or there are Palestinian Authority people that have been going and doing the rounds in Western media. And the question always is, do you condemn these actions? Do you condemn these actions? Of course they condemn the actions, but the reality is that
Yes, we know Western media sucks.
after
shit.
condemning the actions 1,000 times over, it feels like the goal there, if you want to understand and empathize with the Muslim side of this conversation, it feels like the goal there is to derail, to stop talking about Gaza,
Yes,
stop
it
talking
is.
about Palestinian
have
people,
to
just
push
condemn the
against that.
actions and shut the fuck up.
Unfortunately,
And
it's
even
an
if you
it's
do,
an unfair
as I have
reality,
time and time
but you
again,
have to
people
push back.
still go,
Media
well,
wants
your
their
name is
clicks.
Hassan, you're Muslim, you're a supporter of terrorism, and this happened
He
in the
actually
immediate
has
aftermath of
supported terrorism,
2001 and
by the way.
9/11. And ironically, as far as I have seen, at least in the Israeli left, the position is significantly more tempered than the American liberals were at that point, where George W. Bush's approval rating shot up to 91% after 9/11, where America's comfortable security blanket was penetrated, and our collective consciousness changed in that very moment to say, oh my God, we can actually experience this violence in our own homes. And the same goes for Israel as well, where you've mentioned rocket fire. Over the course of the past multiple decades, since 2000 onward, before the October 7 operation, that the casualties were, of course, asymmetrical. Rocket fire still ended up killing people in Israel proper.
Again, it's like,
but
you can look at the numbers, but like, of course, because Israel has it's still the provocation. It's still the attempt. You know what I mean? Just because they have the technology to shoot it out of the sky doesn't mean that the people in Israel are not going to be affected by it.
Right.
No, I understand that, but
there's
also I want to say I need to make
something
something clear that you touched
They live
on.
in a war zone. Hassan
I don't think
doesn't
people
understand this.
who say I support Palestine are pro-Hamas. That's fucking insane.
No.
Okay.
It's like the opposite of everything I've ever said. Okay? There is something I noticed that rubbed me wrong, which was that
Bring up second thought in the podcast
as the
Hassan
news
was on.
was breaking,
Bring it
as
up.
people were still calling in saying, I'm in my safe house, I hear the terrorists outside killing my neighbors. People are on Twitter or whatever, or activists, whoever, saying, let's go Palestine.
Yep.
Go Palestine. So how am I? It's the timing, Hassan.
No, it's not just the timing.
It's important. Like, we got to make this
They were
huge
cheering the
distinction.
idea of killing
When people are saying go Palestine as they're terrorists killing people, that to me, I don't know who else they're cheering on other than Hamas.
Thank you.
Okay.
Now, if you wait, like, you know, it's the timing, dude. It does matter.
No, it's not just the timing, it's the messaging.
There's an asymmetry to the violence, but there's also an asymmetry to the coverage as well. What do I mean by this? Mia Khalifa is a good example. You and I were talking about this on the phone earlier.
Fuck that.
Mia Khalifa said
She
things
said the slaughter was a
that
Renaissance painting.
I find to be distasteful and wrong. Okay?
Worse than that.
I think it was distasteful and wrong. I think it was callous. The indifference to violence that civilians are subjected to on the Israeli side as well is callous. However, the reaction to Mia Khalifa has never ever occurred on the other side.
You're right.
When Israel
You're
is
right.
engaging in bombing campaigns.
Yeah, it's fucked up.
And like you said, the horrific images that you saw that draw so much emotion out of you, of like, you know, Palestinian fathers holding their daughters in this open air prison. There is no equivalence. I think a lot of people who have been advocates for Palestinians for many, many years, especially if they're Muslim, know this reality, that you have to be incredibly careful all the time with your rhetoric, and that even in an emotional moment, you can never actually,
you can
never say something that will be misconstrued. And Mia Khalifa said something that was inappropriate and unacceptable.
Inappropriate.
Hold on.
Inappropriate.
She showed a picture of terrorists roaming in a pickup truck murdering civilians. She described that as a Renaissance painting.
Yeah.
And she went further and said, will the Palestinian freedom fighters please flip their phone
I know,
vertically?
I saw.
I mean, that's worse than unacceptable.
So
it's evil.
So you're correct on that.
Okay.
So let me ask you this.
He won't say it's evil though, because
when
he's
Lindsey
a coward.
Graham goes on and says this is a religious war and we must ethnically cleanse, we must wipe our enemies.
Should get the same coverage.
No, I know, but it doesn't, Ethan. That's the point. Like Marco Rubio doesn't call for ethnic cleansing. These are people in positions of power. These are people who are literally facilitating in the bloodshed. These are people who actually are engaging in the continuation. These are not former porn stars who were Christian Lebanese who now
whatever, dude. She was getting a lot of attention. People were liking it. It wasn't like, but here's the problem.
That doesn't.
Here's
but
the
that's
problem.
meaningless. Is
Bro,
what I'm saying.
No,
in the
it's
grand
not
scheme of
meaningless.
things, because that doesn't.
Think about who her audience is.
Go ahead.
When you say, like, the timing is fucked up, or like, why does Mia Khalifa get all this shit? And it's like always a whataboutism.
Thank you.
It's always like, you can never just say yes, and also, can we fucking hold Lindsey Graham accountable? which I agree, and it's crazy the shit they say, and they should get more attention for it. But it's like there's a refusal to acknowledge, like
both are evil.
It's always about like,
both
well, what
are
about
evil.
us? Which I understand, but it's like you have to say yes, you have this thing, and we also have this thing, and not like in the same breath say, but yes, but like it just doesn't feel. It feels fucked up.
I think the former Palestinian Authority member went on like BBC and did the rounds in the UK,
Which,
said
by
it
the way,
best,
I
where
recommend
it was
people look
every
at those
single time you
interviews.
bring me on
Some of the
here,
most fucked up
when
shit I've ever seen.
Palestinians
British media is
have done
garbage.
anything, you demand condemnation from me. Okay, we have done this. We have done this so many times. I am not Hamas. My family members were killed by Israel. Six-year-olds, like 6 of my family members were killed by the Israeli occupying force. I have condemned it every single time. I've condemned Hamas every single time. But the reality is that no such condemnation is demanded from the media when Israeli officials are brought on to talk about like genuinely genocidal terms in which they're wiping out Gaza. And that is a constant, and that has never ever been anything like there's never been any equivalence whatsoever.
Hassan?
And I think that people
who controls the media?
who are passionate, or people who say people who are callously indifferent to the wanton violence of retaliation that is reactionary to apartheid
callous indifference
are
to the suffering and the
thinking
murder
that they can
of
get away
Israeli
with
civilians.
saying these sorts
You
of things
don't
because
have
they've
to
seen
whataboutism this.
people
It's
who are
both
defenders
evil.
of Israel say infinitely worse things as more bombing campaigns have continued. More than 1,200, almost 2,000 Israelis died. Israelis are terrified of a violent retaliation, right? Israelis now understand better than ever before the feeling that people in Gaza experience on a daily basis. The fear that they live with on a daily basis.
What a fucking idiot.
That is going to breed more hostility, and that is going to play Palestinians directly into the hands of the most radical, the most fundamentalist forces
and
that
was
were
the
directly
point.
propped
That's
up
why Hamas
by
did
the
this.
Israeli government,
This is
by
what they
Mossad.
wanted.
Hamas
This gave
was seen
Hamas
as
a
a
win.
counterweight,
Hamas
a counterbalance
does not care about the
to
Palestinian
secular
people.
forces
They are a
and
puppet
Marxist and
organization.
socialist
They
forces
don't give a
who
shit
also
about the
were violently,
Palestinians.
who participated in violent acts as well. However, the fundamentalist Islamist Muslim Brotherhood cutout was directly logistically supported by the Israeli government and has been propped up specifically
Something that
by
many
even
governments have
Netanyahu
done. It comes
and every
out of
other
the
Israeli
playbook
government
of the
as
CIA.
the
It also comes out of the playbook of the
force
Nazis.
to take
The
seriously
Nazis
for
used
Palestinians.
literal socialists
It's impossible to ignore
enact
this
their
when talking
policies
about the violent
to in turn
retaliation.
Kill socialists.
I think
this is
that-
a thing that
I
has happened
agree, dude.
before.
Yeah.
And
I
Ethan
don't
is not
disagree with
denying
that.
this.
I think equally it's important for Israelis to understand why there is, if the Israelis cannot empathize with the idea that why people want to do violent retaliation,
Yes.
why people support Hamas, then we're also never going to have peace.
Yes. And
Everybody
and it's
needs
more,
to empathize.
And I think it's more important than ever to ensure that people recognize that
Now,
both
so now
in the
Ethan asked
Western
him,
world
how does
that
what Mia Khalifa
props
said
up
or what
the
Second Thought
far-right
said on the
Israeli
podcast that he
regime
was on
that
further
turns a
that
blind
empathy.
eye to the
It
violence.
doesn't do anything.
And
It makes it worse.
it's important
It sows
for
division.
our brothers and sisters that are living in Israel proper, that are anti-Zionists, that are also fighting that very same battle every day, to make sure that people understand that the only way out of this, well, there's two different ways out of this. It's ethnic cleansing. It's like doing a final solution to the Palestinians, or it's a pathway towards developing a nation state where Palestinians, Muslims, Christians, Jews can live, coexist, and have equal rights
By the way,
and equal
we are beyond that
representation.
now. I'm sorry,
Right.
that's a pipe dream.
At the end of the day, all I'm asking is for people to be able to say that, you know, terrorism is bad.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Yeah.
Without
How
an
is that so
exception.
hard?
Without subtext. No, listen. Without a fucking asterisk that's like.
Thank you.
Yeah, but, you know, I mean, what the fuck, man?
No, I understand where you're coming from with that. I think. And
I'm not saying you do it, by
Giannis
the way. I'm expressing
Giannis Varoufakis
frustration.
talked about this.
No, he doesn't.
Where he said there was a practice in the ANC in apartheid South Africa that was called necklacing. I'm not entirely sure what it was. It was brutal. The ANC originally under
They put tires around people's
under
heads,
leadership of Nelson
poured
Mandela,
gasoline in the
demonstrated
tires,
peacefully
and lit
multiple
people
times.
on fire. That was necklacing.
There was a police retaliation in apartheid South Africa where 69 demonstrators died. Obviously, the conditions were brutal. They had this concept called a pencil test. You know what I mean? Like where they would put a pencil in your hair to see if you were how non-white you were. If the pencil stuck, you were considered non-white, not allowed to go into certain places. Now, all of that was violent. The maintenance of that was violent. When all was said and done, Nelson Mandela realized that violent reaction was demanded from the people on the ground, demanded from the emancipatory forces, demanded from the 90% black people that comprised the South African population. He was jailed. He went to Algeria first. He went to Ethiopia. He talked to revolutionaries. He talked to Marxists. He came back to Africa. He was immediately South Africa. He was jailed. Time and time again, the government demanded that he denounce the violence. He said, how can I talk to you on equal conditions when I am chained?
There's a very big difference between denouncing violence and denouncing terrorism.
How can you put my freedom as a talking point, as a way to get me to denounce violence when you have made no efforts you've made no conciliatory efforts. You've made no efforts in understanding the position of people that you have subjugated,
Again,
that you have forced to exist in these apartheid conditions. At the end of the day, nobody remembers the violence of the ANC forces.
No, they do. It's just
because
not widely
the violence
discussed.
of apartheid regime was all too great, was significant, was more significant than the violence that the horrifying violence, even those that, of course, civilians were subjected to. Because if I were to ask you today, what's worse, the violence towards the civilians in apartheid South Africa or the violence of the apartheid regime, you would say the violence of the apartheid regime, right?
I don't know. Did they mass murder 1,500 civilians?
I don't know the exact civilian casualties, but in Algeria, no, they did
South
some brutal
Africa?
stuff. Yeah.
Apartheid? So
Yes.
hold up. How many? Well, I mean, not that it fucking matters.
No, but like, yeah,
It's not a
exactly.
numbers game.
But the
Both are bad.
conversation
Hello.
is important
Both are
to
bad.
analyze from that perspective, because people that are forced into a corner that see no other way out are going to do this, and and if you don't make any concessions, if you treat the secular Palestinian Authority like they're garbage and then use them as a part of your security, your surveillance state, and have them be seen as collaborators with the Israeli government that is currently imprisoning and defending the settlers, like you said, the fundamentalist religious freaks in the West Bank, then of course Palestinians that are going to be like, well, what the fuck? Well, this is our two-state solution. This is our peaceful coexistence. That we're losing our homes. We're getting bullied in our own neighborhoods. We have dudes from Brooklyn and Long Island coming in and being like, this is my house now. Like, if you see that as your peaceful coexistence as a pathway forward, you are inevitably radicalizing people to react to that in more and more violent ways. And that is entirely in the hands of the Israeli government to scale back, regardless of how,
and you have to understand
regardless of how Israeli
people
feel about the matter, whether they are understandably paranoid and understandably scared or not. I mean, remember, the first Intifada was rocks. The second one was bombs, like suicide vests and suicide bombs in public transit.
To go?
There's
dirty bombs,
it has escalated
bombs.
throughout years as as the Israeli occupation has gotten worse and worse. And this is a reality that even former Israeli officials recognize and reckon with and ask for change on. You know what I mean?
I 100%, dude. I understand everything you're saying.
Isn't going to bring people to the table.
Like, people forget, like in the 90s, there was at least some form of freedom of travel between Israel proper, West Bank, and Gaza. There were no the border walls and
before the extremists got into government.
The freedom of movement, freedom of travel was not stopped. It was not restricted. And look
90s,
where we're at now. What's up?
In the 90s, I feel like there were a lot more talks of peace that seemed actually close.
Yep.
Like, it didn't seem that impossible back then, from what I remember.
Yeah, and then what happened? The one dude, the one dude who was like, okay, guys, look, I'm a Zionist. I think that we should, at the very least, maintain the security of the Israeli state in a reasonable way. We have to fucking reason with these guys. He was called a pussy and then assassinated. And the dudes that literally wanted him assassinated are now in positions of power.
Right.
Yeah, it's
and they have been voted for. They've been voted into office over and over and over and over.
Why did they get voted back into
just
office?
to be clear, these fringe right freaks
of the
are
paranoia
like
and the violence
very.
that comes
They've been getting more support, but like the reason they're in power, they don't usually get a lot of support in the parliament. Netanyahu was forced into some really fucked up psychotic coalitions with fringe freak, genocidal maniacs.
Yeah, that's the latest government that he put together just to stay in power.
It's worth mentioning that it doesn't have wide support amongst Israelis.
Thank you.
Yeah, but even look, there is a member in the Knesset that immediately after immediately after October 7th came out and was like, this is directly the responsibility of the government and the occupation. This is why people are retaliating.
And
he was right. So I'm not saying that there aren't
Hassan
voices. It's just that
really
the voices are deafened. The voices are additionally deafened
it's not that
when any kind of retaliatory action is immediately weaponized. It's expected and weaponized to make the Israeli population become even more reactionary and demand more blood.
Let me just ask you this then, and the analogy I gave you, okay, just to get a direct answer, where as the terrorist attacks are happening, there's people calling, saying, my neighbors are being shot by terrorists right now, and there's people saying, go Palestine. Are they talking about Palestinian freedom, or are they encouraging Hamas to kill Israelis?
I don't know what people are.
I don't know what they're
demanding. It's not unreasonable for me to assume that.
No, it's not unreasonable.
And I mean, listen, I think.
And if you're Palestinian, for the record, I'll take it one step further. Look, you talked about the paranoia that Israelis feel towards Palestinians or Hamas, right? And I will say this as well. I think that if you are Palestinian and it is understandable that they see this as an emancipatory action. It doesn't have to be right, and it's not right, but it does not matter because for them, this is the first time that they have seen that they have seen like they've seen the security apparatus fall apart.
It's not like
that they've seen the barriers that were designed, that were constructed around Gaza get bulldozed.
Dude, I got no problem with them breaking through the borders. Like and doing some kind of shit. Maybe I do have a problem, but let's say
what kind of shit though?
They attacked a military outpost. They attacked settlers. I'm not saying I'm okay with it, but like this is more acceptable. But like going and roaming through a kibbutz and murdering families is like I just don't think there's any room for exceptions there.
No,
there's a big difference. You know what I mean? Like I understand and I know you do. I'm just explaining for myself.
Yeah, civilian targets are never seen as appropriate. That is 100%.
And it was just
that is literally that's the rule. Is that like civilian targets are not appropriate?
And again, Israel kills civilians, right? Not saying that. I know they do.
He's a fucking weasel.
It's like, it's not even debated, at least in serious people who are trying to have a serious conversation about it. And so, it seems a little obtuse, though, to look at an activist during a terrorist slaughter saying, let's go Palestine, and not say like, yeah, they're probably cheering on Hamas to kill.
They're basically
Palestinians.
cheering on ethnic cleansing.
I think
by the
that
way.
whoever people are cheering on is ultimately inconsequential because the actions of the state and the actions of our state.
Wait.
The actions
he
of all
literally just
Western
said that
states.
Israelis getting out there cheering on Palestinians being killed.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. Oh God.
Again,
he's
and
such a
I find it
weasel.
to be unproductive, and I also think it's
Fucking
ridiculous.
weasel.
And I'm not saying you're doing this, but I think it's fucking ridiculous that the indifference that people have to human casualties is gross. And it's never more perfectly demonstrated by people being like, oh, the BLM Chicago account that is like not even affiliated with the organization, even though I don't even like the official BLM organization anyway.
Oh, they're just inconsequential. They don't really matter.
Is posting a photo, right? And then immediately people are like, look, this is how BLM is. Like, you know, see,
They
you
didn't
guys
come
have to
down,
immediately
condemn it, or take it down
apologize.
for over a
Everyone who
day.
has like been associated with BLM has to apologize for this random fucking Instagram account. That is politics. People are using the deaths
condemn, yes.
of Israelis and the deaths of Palestinians to do domestic politics, and I think that's fucking ridiculous. And I also think, and maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't, that a part of the do you condemn the violence, do you condemn the violence, do you condemn the violence rhetoric is I think cynically applied to every single person that wants to talk about ending this conflict.
No.
Even if it's talking about ending the conflict from the perspective of like Israeli security, where the Harvard Student Organization that got together and said the violence that Israel experienced today is squarely the consequence of the brutal occupation. They said that in the United States of America, the Harvard Students Organization. There's plenty of Jewish Americans that are involved in writing that. What happened? Every single psychopathic VC hedge fund dipshit said, these people need to be punished. Give us their names. And they got their names. They did Canary Mission style psychopathic doxing on students for saying what? For saying exactly the same thing that the Haaretz editorial board wrote.
To be clear,
word for word,
leftists
bar
have
for
doxed
bar.
cops,
The
military
Israeli
personnel,
paper of record.
I'll say this.
And
Border
the
Patrol
Harvard Students Association
people.
had an
So,
identical
it's the
perspective.
same
And
fucking
what
thing.
happened in America?
It
They got
sucks.
doxxed. There are on the campus right now.
Again,
there are literally their photos are being
I
posted.
read the letter. It was not that bad. People are going crazy and way overreacting about it. If people are mad about that, it's probably because of the timing.
Yeah.
But there's no timing placed on another a group of people's emancipation. There's no
Oh, come on.
my
timing
on.
matters.
No,
Let's not be obtuse about this. It's just this one point I'm trying to make. You can't cheer on Hamas, dude.
I do. Well, Ethan, I said, you know what I said, on the day of the occupation.
I know you don't, but like we're being a little silly. Like if somebody says
No, you're not
go
being silly.
fucking
You're being facetious.
The only
You're
difference
lying.
between what I
Palestine
said,
while people are being murdered, like that's pro Hamas. That's what it is. You're helping. You know what I mean? That's what it is. And I understand all the little subtext.
But what's the distinction? But what's the distinction between what the Harvard students said, what I said, what many Israelis also said as well, versus like what you perceive other people were saying when you don't know the fuller picture of like their perspective?
First of all, I don't have a problem with what they said.
Okay, you don't.
And I'm curious about how soon after this massacre it was released, because I assuming, and we can look into
what's
this.
the barrier of acceptability though? Or is it that you know me personally and you know what my opinion is, which is why
What did you say?
You can understand.
You didn't say anything like you did not say like free Palestine or some shit after as murderers were happening.
He got on a podcast where his
resistance
co-host
to
said
apartheid
that there are
is
no
always
civilians
imperfect,
in Israel, and
there
all of them
are
military
casualties
targets.
everywhere.
That's what he did.
Which means there are
And he
casualties
sat
on the
there
Israeli
and said
side,
nothing
and there are going to be
because he's a
casualties on
coward.
the
I have no problem with
Palestinian
that
side.
statement, Hassan.
Yes, that is ultimately the same as saying free Palestine. It is, because
it's
my
not,
goal
dude.
is to free Palestine.
I know
he's such a
I know what
weasel.
you mean,
No,
but it's not. It's not the same, bro.
Here's the thing.
You're saying what you're saying is, And again, people, don't be silly about this. I'm talking about the timing. As civilians are being murdered, as the story's developing, people saying this, okay? That's an important distinction. Like, your take about, like, listen, Gazans are under apartheid, they're being genocided and all this, which is all true.
And that is what's causing this violent retaliation.
And it's what's causing this retaliation, yes. Which is all true. I'm sorry, but it's not the fucking same as saying, let's go Palestine as bodies are hitting the floor. It's not the same.
No, I understand.
And frankly, I think people are in the
distinction.
Thank you. And
people
I think
people are not being careful.
And I think people are justified in looking at that and thinking,
being paranoid,
like,
and thinking these people are out to
this
kill
person's
them.
happy that Israeli citizens are dying.
Yes.
Like what? Like, I'm sorry, but that's a defensible position to take.
No, Ethan.
He doesn't think it's a defensible position.
You're expanding on free
he
Palestine in
Look
that
at his
moment.
reaction. Look at his body language.
I'm glad that Israelis are being murdered.
Hassan literally wants
jump
to
there,
say, I don't care that
no, let me explain.
Go ahead.
The jump there is literally you knowing what I represent and who I am versus you not knowing. You want to know why? Because you think when I said that, people didn't misconstrue my statements. My name is Hassan. I am the America Deserved 9/11 guy. If you think
he
that
also said Dan
the very
Crenshaw
same
should get his eye
forces,
socket
the
fucked
very
by,
same people that despise what I had to say about blowback in 9/11 did not have the exact same opinion that you have over
I don't know what other people thought about what you said, okay? I know that I thought it was a much more respectful, empathic take.
You know what Hassan did after he said that about 9/11? You know what he said? It was an ESL, an English as a second language issue.
Next 2
when
days,
he went and did an apology
were still deep
on his
embedded inside of Israeli proper positions in southern towns. So there were still people dying.
So how about this as a separation?
What?
When people are calling in the news and talking about their neighbors and children being murdered in front of them, is not the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, he doesn't think so.
I mean,
he doesn't think so. Look at his body
language.
language. He's a piece of shit.
You just can't do that.
Hassan's
I'm
a
sorry.
piece of shit.
It's gross.
I get what you're saying, except the you as someone who recognizes the violence of the occupation know that this by the very same metrics, saying I stand with Israel implies that you stand with Israel's genocidal conduct, right? And therefore.
Well, it does kind of seem like that. I mean, that is what it says.
Okay.
I disagree with people saying that. So if Israel's bombing Gaza, people are saying, I stand.
Not just bombing Gaza. Israel's apartheid regime and occupation is endless. It might be sidelined, it might be silent, it might be the constant, but that is still violent.
If Israel is bombing Gaza. Okay.
Non-Israelis just bombing Gaza.
Dude,
come on.
Okay. I heard you.
Come on.
Go on. Sorry. I have to pee so bad.
If you leave, I win.
It's over. I'm holding it.
If Israel IDF is bombing Gaza, and and you're seeing the media that I saw, or even not seeing the media I saw, because that civilians are getting injured or killed, and you say I support Israel in that moment, then I do think you are supporting the IDF and the Israeli regime.
What is so hard to understand about this?
Apartheid violence.
Okay. Do you think that there is the same energy and same condemnation, even remotely the same condemnation and energy
Both are
for
wrong.
those who say I stand with Israel, all the way from Justin Bieber using a photo of destroyed Gaza.
Wait, hold on, let me pull that
to
up.
be like praying for Israel.
Where's
like,
that?
What are you praying for, bro? Israel to stop? Like, what's going on? What are you praying for?
That was one of the craziest things I've seen. He posted a picture of Gaza being basically a whole street block being leveled by Israeli bombs.
So crazy.
It says, "I'm praying for Israel."
Yeah, he was praying for Israel to stop. Jamie Lee Curtis.
That was crazy.
Jamie Lee Curtis posting a photo of children in Gaza looking up at the sky as Israel is bombing them and going, "I stand with Israel." Israeli flag. Like the and so many other examples. Charlie Kirk showing photos of the Israeli occupying force entering West Bank homes and posting that video and going, look at what the Hamas terrorists are doing. Or so many other examples of
so much dumb,
so many examples of
stupid propaganda.
Palestinian children, babies in cages that the Israeli occupying force put them in, that people are posting and going, look what the Hamas is doing. Look at this cruelty. How cruel, how unusual.
I've seen it all. It's all crazy. It's all psychotic propaganda.
I don't even blame them.
Super cynical, fucked up things.
No, it's not. It's not even cynical. Ethan,
well, no, the people who create the propaganda are cynical.
It's not even cynical though. I don't even fucking blame them, because yes, there is an asymmetry to this violence, and you have been willingly or you have completely been shut out from one side of that of the recipients of said violence, and therefore you simply do not know. You don't know what the reality is.
There's no excuse for her doing
by
that.
God, there is a lot more
Or
examples pre-October 7. There's a lot more examples of like Israeli brutality and Israeli cruelty upon Palestinians. So you're inevitably going to accidentally post shit like that.
The thing is, like, with all this nuance and background and history, you still, if we're being serious about peace, you still you can't look at an Israeli, you know, who is traumatized by what happened, in context of everything you've said, which I all agree with, and say, yes, but, you know, it's horrible, or like, yes, but, it's like I'm just saying, on a human level, in the real world, you can't do that. You can't, like, you have to just give them their grief.
It's not that you can't do it.
You have to give them the fucking You have to grant them. I mean, they made them victims on that day. Those people, anyway.
Yeah.
And so, like,
do you feel like
when you're having a conversation with Israelis, and Israelis are looking to the outside world, I'm saying I agree with everything you're saying, but if you're trying to communicate your condolences for grief or something like that, you don't say, yes, but.
I think people should be more careful. I think people should be more careful, and I think people should be more open-minded. I agree.
I understand why you do it. I'm just talking about in the real world.
Yeah.
When you're talking to an Israeli who it comes from the Israeli perspective. Here's a fucking hard truth that people, I don't know if people will accept it or not.
Literally.
Listen, if you're born in Gaza, you're going to hate Israel 100%. If you're born in Israel, you're probably going to hate Hamas and maybe Palestinians. I don't know. I don't think most Israelis do, but Hamas for sure, okay? And so it doesn't even, like, the human experience is constant. It doesn't matter which side of the fence you're born on. You're going to believe. You're gonna fucking identify with whatever world experience you're going under.
Yes.
I don't disagree with you. We've already established this. So now I ask you this. I genuinely, the major point of contention that you and I have in this process is, I think it is frivolous and I think it is unproductive to find
it's frivolous
for
a porn star with 100,000 followers to get up there and say that murdering civilians looks like a Renaissance painting.
You're wrong for saying this. Like, sure, they're wrong, but that doesn't change the reality on the ground.
I don't think it's fair to characterize it as like a few rogue tweets. I mean,
because ultimately,
this was a lot of people.
Prominent leftist activists.
But people tweeting whatever the fuck,
frivolous,
does not change.
His own podcast co-host said that there are no civilians in Israel. That they're all militant combatants who deserve to die.
Perspective.
Literally.
If tomorrow the Israeli perspective shifted and was like,
I wish Ethan knew
85% of the fucking Israeli population currently thinks that Benjamin Netanyahu is the reason why 2,000 Israelis died. 85% of the Israeli population right now, according to the Jerusalem Post, in the latest.
And let's all fucking remember that when talking about Israelis.
Yes. So some of them, though, obviously think they should be more brutal. Some of them think that Benjamin Netanyahu's occupation, or a much smaller percentage, think that the occupation is responsible for this violence. Now, having said that, do they have a say? Can they unseat Benjamin Netanyahu?
Yes,
Is he
they
going
can.
to jail? No, of course not.
He's being tried, actually.
Well, exactly, which is why he built a coalition with fucking Ben Gvir and all the other far right freaks.
He was actually being tried for fraud or some crazy shit.
Yeah, even more far right freaks. And many people are calling for his resignation. He is not going to do that. It's not going to happen.
86%,
even if he resigns, think about it this way.
Hold on, 86% said that the attack from Gaza is a failure of leadership.
Yeah. 86. Yeah, that's what I said.
And by the way,
you did.
This is just
that's like everybody.
This is Jewish citizens, so this
Yes.
isn't even
Right.
including obviously the Arab Israelis.
And people who watch this show know when we do polls and it's 86%, that's basically everybody.
Yes, exactly, 100%. Like, who the fuck is dick riding Netanyahu in that point? Because like, from either angle, even if you think like Palestinians should be ethnically cleansed, or you think Palestinians should the occupation should end for the security purposes of Israeli citizens, it doesn't matter. You're still going to arrive at that conclusion that it is Benjamin Netanyahu's fault, because the power player in this situation is what matters. The power player in this situation is entirely responsible. The situation, for example, in Afghanistan, with the Taliban's numbers not withering away, but instead growing in popularity during the American occupation, is a perfect example of what happened, and is a perfect example of what's constant with occupying forces and with their violent means of subjugating, humiliating, and murdering the population. You fucking kill, who was it? Even that, I forget who this was, but I remember someone saying like, look, in 2014 or in 2004, time and time again, whenever bombing campaigns occur and people die and children die, you know, their relatives are still alive. The ones that are still alive are going to go, well, I know who fucking bombed me. I know who fucking killed my family. I know who fucking dropped bombs on my house. I'm not going to forget that. That is at the heart of the matter. And a real reconciliation with that means completely going back on 75 years of brutal occupation and policies that were deemed necessary at the time for Israeli security, that absolutely was just a cynical way to justify taking more and more land from Palestinians who had no say, who have never had a say in the conversation, and still to this day have no say. I mean, seriously, the resilience of Palestinian people all around the world, the 5 million displaced, 2 million living in Gaza, and another 2.5 million living in the West Bank is unimaginable. They've never had allies. They've always had imperfect allies and allegiances with people that are just simply only interested in destabilizing Israel. Like, I don't think Iran
just fucking wants to use them as a puppet.
I don't think Iran gives a shit about like Palestinians being free. I think it's very cynical. And they have nothing. They have nothing. They've never had anything. There is no equivalence here between the well-oiled military machine of the Israeli army that has gotten $264 billion in American taxpayer dollars to continue its operations. It's just not. There's an asymmetry to the violence, and there's also an asymmetry to the conversation where Palestinians like living in fucking Gaza are being called by the BBC, and while bombs are being dropped on their fucking heads, the BBC anchor is like callously being like, "Do you condemn the Hamas violence?"
And
by the way,
that's
fucking stupid.
It's like fucking insane, and they never.
And I don't want people to conflate what I'm saying with BBC asking someone in Gaza taking bombs if they support Hamas.
So here's the thing: I've never, ever in my entire life, ever seen a couple things. I've never seen the American government, the State Department, ever say this was a provoked act of violence from Palestinians. I've never seen that. They always say it's unprovoked because it is supposed to be that violence is like, they act like that violence is in a vacuum. And I know you agree with me on this. I don't think you disagree with me on this at all. They never say this was a provoked act of violence, okay? That is by design. And I've never seen somebody bring up an Israeli official, okay, to television when Gaza is being bombed and being reduced to rubble, or even when Gaza is not being bombed and the brutal occupation still remains, and been forced to condemn the violent actions of the Israeli government. I've never seen that. I've never heard that. I've never seen that, and I don't think that that will ever happen because at the end of the day, America wants a military base in the Middle East. America wants a destabilizing force that they see in the Middle East. America wants to keep selling weapons. America still wants conflict. The Western world still wants conflict, and they use Israel to that end. And they will continue doing this in 35 different states in the United States of America, where all of these like free speech, supposedly First Amendment defending states, it is illegal to ask to boycott and ask to make divestments and to ask to sanction the state of Israel. It is illegal. It is, you cannot hold a position as a school teacher without signing a fucking thing that says, I will never participate in the peaceful demand that you want to boycott, divest, or put sanctions on the state of Israel. What?
What countries is that in?
In the United States of America, 35 states.
Oh, 35 states.
37 as of now, I believe, but 35 as of 2021. Think about that.
Nuts. Yeah,
and the AIPAC wrote that legislation. They helped push it. They wrote the legislation. There is no comparison.
And by the way, conservative support for Israel is about as cynical as it gets.
Absolutely.
Their whole worldview is that the Jews are guarding Israel until Jesus comes back.
Yes.
And when he does, he's going to kill all the Jews.
It is a suicide cult. It is a suicide cult. The assumption that, like, from the river to the sea, the chosen sons and daughters of God will maintain Israel, and therefore Jesus Christ will come down and defeat Shaitan and Megiddo, is a psychotic, suicidal cult. Yet that is the reason why not American Jews, but evangelical Christians, evangelical Protestants are the #1 defenders of the Israeli occupation. They are the ones who push for it. They're the ones who fucking fund the psychopathic settlers that you pointed out. That they are the ones who open up 501c3s so that they can get tax-deductible donations. Yeah, no, I think... yes, of course, Christians play a gigantic role in this. I mean, it was the fucking British that propped up Zionist brigades. Yes,
I mean,
this still
in a
goes
way,
back to England.
I mean, in a way, though, it is like, you know,
it all comes back to the Brits.
It's like,
doesn't it?
you know, if you're coming out of World War II at the Holocaust and you're being offered land by Britain and you're
hold on, your camera's out.
I'm gonna go pee. I'm gonna go pee while you're gone. Oh no, now I'm censored.
I'm fucking winning this argument.
I'm not taking a pause to pee.
Well, they can hear me, right?
Yeah.
So I was. So anyway, I'll continue my point as you guys work it out. I was saying that, you know, coming out of the Holocaust, you can hardly blame people
for being paranoid
who are offered land in their historic religious,
these people were not under the impression
most important religious
that this
spot
land would be
by
offered
the
to
British
them via
are hardly
violence.
going to say no to that. Like, you
and
know,
mind you, the British
it's just,
did this
again,
because they wanted the Jews
human
out of
experience. What group of people would have said, nah, that's
Jews
not
as a
cool?
destabilizing
And then
force.
important to note that those same British simultaneously also promised the Arabs in Palestine a state there.
Yeah.
They were literally offering conflicting offers
Offering
to
things
two
that they
different
could
groups of
not
people.
deliver.
So
good work,
like,
guys.
again, when people, I do think when people try to like,
Interfere.
people try to reduce this conflict as something that's not simple. It's something that's so easy to understand.
Parts of the
I don't
conflict
think
are simple,
is
but the
entirely fair.
overarching
I really
conflict
don't.
is not
like
simple.
the
There are many
the war
actors in
crimes, the murder, all the shit that's happening is obvious and easy and easy to point to Israel. But if you're talking about like the establishment of Israel, the long feuds over the land going back 75 years, where, again, as Dan was saying, the British went to the Jews after the Holocaust and said, you guys want to live in Jerusalem? And they're like, fuck yeah. And then
To be
Wait,
fair,
to
they
the
were, they were
Palestinians.
lobbying for it for a long time too. They wanted that.
Okay.
But they
Well, they got the green light.
right. They got the green light. But yeah,
And by all the United Nations, or whatever, the League of Nations, whatever the fuck or I don't know. It was UN.
it was yeah, and in fact,
Yeah, it was
had
League
been a
of
long time.
Nations.
Originally, it was the League of Nations, but no, it was the UN had just been established after World War II, which is what set up the state. And when I was looking, when I was doing kind of a deep dive on all of this history in the past week, I was shocked to see. I guess I maybe knew this at one point, but the USSR was in support of it too.
Yes.
One of the very few times that
Ooh, you want to know who
the United
else?
States and the USSR were on board with each other.
You want to know who else is a big time supporter too? China.
Yeah.
China
Right.
is a major ally and a major
Really?
trade partner to Israel. Yes,
Oh,
abso-fucking-lutely.
that's what RFK Jr. was talking about.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the COVID doesn't affect the Jews.
Well,
and-
no, yeah, no, it's not. So remember that when people in the chat will say like, "Oh, you fucking major defender of China." No, I think that China is also not exactly a fucking equal party here, or one that is advocating for reasonable solutions. I think that. There is a reason why they are not saying anything. They're not coming out with like big declarations as they
China,
normally would
pro-genocide
in an
China,
effort
by
to
the
be like,
way.
look at America being fucking imperialist again or whatever.
Muslim
just to finish my
camps,
point
look 'em
when you were in the
Go ahead.
bathroom is that
the
I think
reason
it's
why they get along
unfairly
with Israel so
reductive
well.
to say it's not complicated. You know, going back to the establishment of Israel, the duplicity
I
of
don't
the
think-
English, going back to the skirmishes and all there's been atrocities on both sides from the beginning. Okay, obviously Israel has continued to take more and more
There is
as
enough
they've enjoyed
blood
the
between
benefit
both
of
sides
funding and
that a
support from the
lasting
international
peace is
community.
gonna be really
But to write it
fucking
off
hard.
as like the Israelis are just genocidal is unfairly reductive.
I don't think that Israelis are genocidal, even though there are certainly Israelis that are genocidal. There are Americans that are genocidal.
There are
Palestinians are
Turks that are
genocidal.
genocidal.
Like, see,
Just
but,
saying, everyone's.
but-
There's people who are. I'm just saying.
yeah, sure, but
There are. Everybody has
yes,
genocidal mania.
I think that
Yes.
like
Am I not?
Hamas
Is that bother
Hamas
you?
is 1988.
Hold on.
No,
Does
no.
that bother you that I
No,
said?
of course there are. But the reason why I think it's like laughable is because like, which direction is the genocide happening?
Why
Bro,
is it laughable?
You know what I
know.
mean? Like
It's
it's
laughable?
usually I don't
Did
think
he really just say
I think
that?
that you have moral clarity overall, which is why this is a much more charitable conversation. But I think plenty of people do not have that moral clarity, and when they are using the condemn Hamas line, it's not necessarily to get your perspective. It's to deflect away from you talking about Palestinian emancipation
Dude,
and all of the
you
all of the
can't-
wrongs that they
Even though everything you're saying is right,
yeah.
to diminish this idea that there are Palestinians, terrorists mostly. I'm not saying all Palestinians. I don't think most Palestinians even support Hamas. That saying that Palestinians who want genocide of Jews isn't relevant because, again, it affects the Israeli
Yes.
paranoia. It affects the Jewish paranoia, the paranoia psyche, the Israeli psyche. So, like, even though it's absurd, you say that's silly because the Israelis are doing the genocide. Still, fucking feeds into the pathology of what it means to be an Israeli.
Yeah,
That's-
I
you know what I mean?
understand where you're coming from, but ultimately, getting swept away in demanding condemnations over and over again is entirely unproductive
move
and also
past
not
that?
reflective
We're
of the
not looking for
reality of the
condemnation.
doing
American
that. I
population's
don't think-
We're looking
attitudes
for
towards
solutions.
First
the
of all,
defense of
But
Israel.
we don't want you to
and,
defend
and
terrorism.
I don't think that's a
Why
fair-
is not defending
occupation.
terrorism
I don't think that's
so
a
hard?
fair
Come on.
assessment of what I'm asking. What I'm
okay.
saying.
Okay. Well, maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying.
No,
but
you're saying
But like, there is
the
no.
expectation of constant condemnation of the Palestinians against Hamas is not what I'm
It's not what he's
advocating
after.
for.
If you want,
Just to be totally clear,
want to
because I know
talk-
people think that about me.
if you want to talk about like if right now you want to talk about Palestinian emancipation, whether you are Jewish or whether you are Arab, whether you are Muslim, it does not matter. If you talk about Palestinian emancipation at any point during this endless occupation and senseless brutality, you are immediately met with condemn Hamas? Why do you love
And you
Hamas?
stand
Why do
your
you want to
ground.
Not
believe?
support that. That's a different
No,
And
thing.
you
I
ignore
know,
those
but
okay, I just want to make
questions.
that
Why
clear.
is
You and I
this so
having this back and
hard?
forth.
I just want to make it clear
This
because
isn't
people
hard.
think that's what I think, and I want to make it clear that what
He's
I'm
making it
saying
sound like people have no
is
agency.
different entirely
fuck?
to expecting everyone to constantly condemn Hamas. That's not what I
Yes,
think
what you
people need to
think-
do.
what
Condemn
you
terrorism.
have,
You can do. You can walk and chew gum at the same time.
You
can condemn
have a
terrorism
different
and
perspective
still
on the
say that
matter that is not
genocide is
widely
bad.
shared in the Western world, and that is no better demonstrated by the actions that people are taking against the fucking Harvard Students Association versus like what the Israeli paper of records perspective is, which is identical to said Harvard
And the
Students
sad
Association.
part about what you said is that you say Westerners don't agree with that, and you're right. But a lot of Israelis do. And that's fucked up. That people, you know what I mean? Because that's not what people see.
Okay.
Even though
now that we've
government-
established that,
yeah.
though, now that we've established that, do you understand that what I mean when I say there's a double standard with the callous indifference that people demonstrate
Yes,
to the death toll over and over again? I mean, we're talking about dudes that literally Benjamin Netanyahu, when in 2008. People living under brutal occupation in the world's largest open-air prison in Gaza, where 2 million people live, and,
like listening
and
to Bernie
47% of that
Sanders
population is under the age of 14
All he
and
is
under.
a set of talking
Okay,
points. It's
where
all he
their
is. He has
water,
little bullet
electricity,
points that he
like you
has
also
to hit.
pointed out, is
There's no
controlled by
nuance to
Israel.
him. He doesn't really discuss shit.
They did a peaceful march, a demonstration for a right to return. Thousands of children, babies, and adults alike were ruthlessly shot at by Israeli snipers in that right to return as they walked and demonstrated and walked towards that fence, okay? Walked towards that border fence that traps them inside of Gaza. Thousands. While that was happening, if you had seen, or maybe you weren't paying attention, maybe you didn't see this, the media coverage of the matter was some of the most disgusting I have ever seen. While that was happening, the Trump administration was pushing to further annex Jerusalem and offer it in its entirety and recognize it as Israeli, which is, of course, a major point of contention and has never been allowed by the international authority. Completely unjustifiable, inhumane, immoral. Okay?
As much as
so
I
on the
hate
one
Trump,
hand, the Trump
Kushner was
administration
working
alongside
with
the
an
Israeli government
agreement
were celebrating this action. On the other hand,
Israel.
on the other side of the on the other side of Israel
establishing a
proper,
Palestinian
you had
state.
babies being fucking slaughtered, medics, press,
Just so we're
journalists,
clear,
and
there was a lot of work going
yes,
on behind the scenes.
now hold
that
on.
was never
This is
made
really
public.
important. This is really important to understand. Okay? If you demonstrate peacefully and get slaughtered, and then Benjamin Netanyahu goes on television and says callously, these are telegenically dead children. Palestinians have telegenically dead children. If former Israeli ambassadors are going on TV and saying Hamas is using these babies as meat shields, that somehow
Have they
Israel
not
is like
done that, though?
RoboCop, or
They've
this
done
like
that in the
force
past.
that simply cannot stop itself from butchering,
And the fact that
slaughtering
you
fucking
can't
Gazans,
discern
and it's
Hamas
always in the
from
hands of Hamas,
Palestinians.
and that is the
This is part of
constant
the
position
problem.
in both American media, and it is reflected in polling over and over again, where more than 50% of Americans side with Israel on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and only 9% of
Because
Americans
they
actually side with
understand
Palestinians on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, constantly
the
going
fear
back
of
and forth about like
genocide
what
on behalf of the Israeli people.
DSA
They know
affiliated
this.
organization doing like a Free
Hassan operates in
Palestine
a vacuum. He thinks
demonstration or
everything
whatever
is
in the
black and white.
aftermath of October 7, and saying that feels like you're in defense of Hamas, sweaty, is unproductive, and it also doesn't even reflect anything. It doesn't reflect the reality.
No, it's
we
not
know
just about
I don't
in the
think
Western
I don't.
world,
Bro, it's
Palestinians have
emotion.
no.
You know, it's like it's emotional.
beyond
you just
emotion.
you
I
can't
understand.
blame people for
I
seeing that
understand
and
that it's
getting upset.
emotional. But if
You
you,
just can't.
recognize that, then you recognize when you see a sea of I
do
stand with
recognize
Israel.
that,
I
dude.
stand with Israel. Israel must ethnically cleanse Gaza.
I do
varying
recognize
degrees
that.
of people saying that.
I always have.
Then how are Muslims in America that have lived in a massive surveillance state post 9/11? How are Muslims in the Western world who are constantly treated like fucking dogs, who literally are used as a political pawn, even though their homes have been destabilized by America's unjustifiable post 9/11 actions in the form of the war on terror? How are they supposed to think? Oh well, I guess everybody wants us fucking dead. I guess everybody wants the Palestinians to die. Everyone thinks that this is the normal position. Everyone thinks this is the constant position. Like, of course, they are going to look at that
there was a reason that
and
was
think
done.
the exact same things that you're saying.
Israel knew that a
Israelis are feeling the exact
destabilized
paranoia
Middle
that
East would
Israelis are
benefit
feeling.
them more.
And quite frankly, if we look at the asymmetry of violence, if we look at the displacements, if we look at the subjugation, the brutal colonial occupation of not
We
only
can recognize
Palestinians
that all those
but
things
many
are
other
bad, and at the
Muslim
same time
countries that have
recognize
also
that
been
terrorists
ruthlessly
killing
occupied and
1,200
slaughtered by
civilians
Western
is
coalition
also
forces,
bad.
it is
You can walk
perfectly
and chew gum at the
understandable and
same
well within the right
fucking time.
of Muslims to look at that and
Fucking
be
idiot.
understandably paranoid and not necessarily
Wait. So you're supposed to
paranoid
understand
thinking that
Muslim paranoia,
you are
but not
going to
Jewish
have
paranoia.
Hamas forces do a second
He's doing
Holocaust in
whataboutisms
Israel
again.
when the exact opposite is happening to Palestinians right now.
Why doesn't he ask Hassan why no
Do you
Arab
disagree?
country
No.
takes
Okay.
Palestinian
All right.
refugees?
That's why I think it's unproductive that a lot of, not you, but like especially so many liberals in America are
Oh,
like,
here he
oh
goes.
man, the optics of this look really bad, and also
optics of this
Palestinians
do
really
look
fucked
really
up their
bad.
chances
You
of
can't
emancipation.
go to
It's
a
like
peace negotiation when you got
you have
this
to be
going
oblivious
on.
to the reality, and I know you're not.
Fuck.
But others
He's so
have to be
stupid.
oblivious to the reality of the Palestinian existence to make such callous takes, to be like, oh, well, optics sweaty. No, the optics in that situation just imply
it does
that
matter.
you.
Optics
It
do
does
matter.
matter.
I know
you
optics
fucking
matter, but
idiot.
optics don't matter because optics matter in general, but optics do not matter when we talk about the plight of Palestinians, because there's not a single person that is out there defending them in the Western world, whether it be elected officials or whether it be people in the media, and those who choose to do that,
So Bernie
those who choose to
Sanders,
stand up and say,
AOC,
no, Palestinians
Barack
deserve
Obama.
emancipation. I'm not saying you're
No-
not
no
one of these
Western
people,
leaders
but
whatsoever
those
ever
who do
stand up- oh,
stand
come
up
on.
and say that, okay,
What a
they get
fucking weasel.
immediately cast as a terrorism defender, and I
So
saw
what?
the
So what?
spiritual consequences of that in a post 9/11 America. We are still living in the rubbles of post 9/11 America, and its attitude towards Muslims and its attitude towards Islam in general, and
I'm
oh
sorry.
man, it does
people
seem
screaming
like
death
this
to
is
America
somehow even
shouldn't
worse than
change your
that,
mind on the
because
people?
I guess it didn't.
Again,
It didn't impact
optics.
Americans directly, so they can be even more bloodthirsty without any fear that there could be violent retaliation.
Right. I think we both have said our piece on this, and maybe we can move on to another topic now, because there is other stuff I want to talk
Ben
about.
Shapiro got mad at me.
I didn't actually watch that yet.
Yeah.
Are we going to get to the Taylor Swift film soon?
Hold on, there is stuff.
Oh,
there-
okay.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay.
This great March of Return is fucking crazy, though. Just reading about this. Fucking 100 and... What does it say?
Are you talking about 2018 March, the freedom, the right to return?
I'm just reading about it. 40 kids, 190 Palestinians were killed.
Yep.
You know what
At
the
the
IDF,
protests,
you know what the
thousands were
IDF official
injured.
account posted and then deleted? Shouts out to B'Tselem one more time. Wonderful organization. Okay, wonderful Israeli organization, by the way. They captured it before IDF deleted it, because this shows the indifference.
What did they tweet?
They said every single bullet was accounted for. Here, read out the casualty reports.
It says 190 Palestinians were killed, 40 kids, thousands were injured.
There's videos of IDF snipers filming, like putting their phone like this, propped up against the optics, sniping a child, killing them, hitting them in the head, celebrating that his legs flew up in the air as he was shot, and others around them celebrating.
That's fucking. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
that's demonic.
So when you see that, when you experience that, and then the American
Hamas
dogs
soldiers did 3
in
days
American
ago?
media
they
refuse to
did?
reckon with that violence,
They took
and instead turn around and
AK-47s,
have
those
former Israeli officials
AR-15s,
say
those
these are,
weapons of war
these
that
are
Democrats like to talk about
Hamas-backed
a lot,
operatives, like the
and they
fucking
put them
2-year-old
to
or 4-year-old,
5-year-olds' heads
the
and blew their
pregnant
heads
mother
clean off.
that was shot. These are Hamas operatives that deserve to be fucking killed for peacefully demonstrating. What do you do? What can you do? No one hears you, and you're constantly backed into a corner. You are going to retaliate. That is, of course, going to happen.
And Israel needs to
Nobody
understand
is
that.
denying
Israeli
that the retaliation
government,
is not
they need to understand
justified.
that. And that's
Okay.
It's
So
like
then-
it's that mutual empathy. Like
It's the
Israelis need
targets
to
that
understand why
matter.
Hamas is attacking them. If they can't understand that, then nobody can be helped. I mean, it's just it's insane to not see their perspective.
The major thing here is that I think I mean this is there's a reason why Israel did not have local media go to the kibbutzes that you were talking about that were slaughtered.
Oh, here he goes.
They originally
Here he
went
goes.
immediately. They said, we're having foreign press come here.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There was a reason for that. Because they know that internally, the opinion of the Israeli population currently doesn't matter. The Western opinion
I think
matters.
the Israeli opinion on the massacre was pretty unified, dude.
Well, what they say about that is that
Whoa.
they don't.
What
Everybody's
the hell?
already.
Hold on one sec, Hila. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
They're saying everybody is already in such grief and broken that they don't need to show this terrible footage. But
I mean,
they're saying it's important for the world to see what happened, so that's why.
yeah, they're doing propaganda. It's like
Yeah.
not surprising, is it?
Yeah. No, it's not. But I'm just saying that,
And
like,
if you want to
I think that
counterbalance
I mean, it did
that,
happen.
show
I think that
all
there
the
is
footage
more-
of IDF soldiers
They're not like
killing
putting the
civilians.
bodies there and like
You can
putting them in fucked
counterbalance
up
this
ways.
pretty
It's
quickly.
not.
I'm just saying,
That's not
you
what
know,
I'm saying at all.
it's
Come on.
not that cynical to send in the
No,
press.
I think that
It's not
I think
cynical
that
at all. In that case.
I think that the coverage from certain Israeli outlets on the matter is more critical on the Netanyahu administration, and showing that
Yeah,
I think
showing that
and
to local
like
media
the interviews
would ruin
that I've seen
Netanyahu.
as well
Nobody
of the
denies
parents
that.
fucking demanding, basically
And I'm sorry, but the
kicking out
entire international
Israeli
community should be
Knesset
demanding
members
an
that are
independent
visiting the hospitals,
investigation into
yelling
why
at
this
them,
happened.
telling them to fuck off, telling them that this is their fault. I think that, like, there's two different reasons for obviously that level of anger. Some of which say you did this to us by being more brutal,
Yes.
and that this violence, of course, is going to be a constant, and it's going to be a violent
Yes.
retaliation. And then there's also the people that are saying you are not violent enough, right? But ultimately, everyone is critical of the Israeli government at this point from different angles, and I think that's the reason why they care more about the Western media's opinion than anything else, because they don't want to repeat the mistakes that happened last time in both 2018 and also the Shireen Abu Akleh murder. Again, in the hands of an Israeli sniper that the Israeli government said was actually Palestinians, and Western media immediately disproved that.
Yep.
And then what did the
Mind you, he's
IDF
literally
do?
making the point. Western
What did the
media
IDF do?
is
I don't know.
When
usurping the narrative that comes out of Israel.
when a
we don't
wonderful
believe their shit
voice
anymore.
for good, a Christian woman, a Christian Palestinian, and an American citizen, Shireen Abu Akleh, was murdered as she was on her way to one of these refugee camps. She had a press
Yep.
vest on. She had a press helmet on. She was shot in the neck so that she could be assassinated. Okay? This was a major issue. They wanted to do.
Mind you, he's gonna cry about this, but he will not
Sorry.
cry about dead
This
civilians.
is really fucked up.
This is the type of person Hassan is.
They went to her funeral and beat the shit out of people and ripped the Palestinian flag off of her.
Performative. Where's the tears, boy? Where's your tears? Performative.
Palestinian Palestinians can't have a moment of peace in this fucking world. They can't even mourn the dead.
Look very closely. He's not crying, by the way. He's not crying.
The IDF went in and beat the shit out of the Palestinians that were mourning her at her funeral, that were holding her casket, and ripped the Palestinian flag off of her casket. How is that allowed? How can that continue? How do you not see that? That's in the West Bank. This is a Christian woman. This is not a Muslim. This is not Hamas. This is a journalist that was beloved in the Muslim world.
Hassan cares more about a dead journalist than dead children. Let that sink into you.
A light on the atrocities. It's hard to look, it's very hard to hold my composure on this. This is something I've talked about for years and years. But when that
Look
kind
very
of
closely at Hassan. He is not crying. He is being performative.
Sound like fucking Jordan Peterson.
He is literally being performative. He is a
Jesus
fucking
Christ.
clown.
When that kind of brutality is so normal, so normalized, when that's the everyday existence of Palestinians in the supposed collaborative project with the Israeli government, how can you expect them to do anything but violently retaliate?
And he's not crying. Look at him. He is not crying.
And now you have cynical pieces of shit on social media. If you want to talk about social media and people saying stuff on social media, you have cynical liberal commentators that supposedly adorn the politics of radical emancipation, saying, "Oh, how wonderful that Joe Biden is trying to create an exit corridor, a humanitarian corridor for those who are being bombed in Gaza right now to escape through Egypt." That's still ethnic displacement. That is not humanitarian. It is completely unjustifiable.
Do you want them dead, or do you want them out of Gaza? Because that's the only choice right now.
There is no moral equivalence.
What do you want Biden to do?
Equivalence whatsoever.
You want Biden to put U.S. military between
in the way that this is covered
Gazans
in the
and the Israeli military?
And that is by design. They refuse to show
the Israeli
Palestinians
military had
as
no
humans,
problem firing on American vessels
before. And they have very successfully been
before.
able to dehumanize them. There are voices out there. There are voices in Israel. There are voices out there who see it, who see the brutality, who see the endless humiliation that Palestinian people have endured. And I stand with them.
He's not crying.
And I don't care. I will always stand with them.
Fucking LARPer.
Even if there is a moment of violent retaliation, okay? They have nothing. They have no allies.
Violent retaliation.
They have nothing in the world.
No allies.
And people celebrate their destruction. It's happening right in front of our eyes. There's
a minority
nothing, there's no
in Israel celebrate their
horrifying
destruction. He acts like the whole world is cheering on their demise.
In the supposed only democracy in the Middle East, the supposed beacon of prosperity, in a sea of barbaric Arabs, right? Who do mass rapes and love to behead people.
What did the Iranian government do to women protesting this year?
All of these are racist canards.
What is Saudi Arabia doing to the Yemenis right now?
The tensions and to justify
he hasn't said shit about Saudi Arabia has been doing to the Yemenis. Little ethnic cleansing of Houthis.
About paying attention to what's
going
LARPer. On in Gaza.
Holy fuck.
That's why I wanted to make the distinction that
he's a clout whore.
What goes on in the West Bank, clout whore. This is constant. This is every day for Palestinians. Every day. It's crazy. Like, I know it's, you can say, like, oh, land back movements are supposed to be violent or whatever, but there's nothing more violent than this. This is the violence. It's just that it's legalized. It is state-backed. So we are not trained to see it as a violent act.
Hassan.
That's the difference. It's only violent or it's only terrorism when it's a non-state actor or a foreign adversary that engages in it. And that's why, if you look at the United Nations, if you look at British or European authorities that have spoken out, correctly condemned Russian atrocities in Ukraine, you will hear silence when it comes to Israel and what Israel has done and
Russia
what Israel continues to do to Palestinians.
Localization matters.
Disgusting.
And yeah, it's disgusting that they don't do anything about this. But what are you going to do when you have armed Israel with state-of-the-art weapons?
I don't know.
What are you going to do? How do you do something?
Fine, I'm good.
Seeing this and hearing you talk about it, I do probably feel
Hassan
like
was not
I
crying.
haven't been
He was not
as
crying.
empathetic
That was
with
one of the most
the,
performative, disgusting things I've ever fucking
experience
seen. And he was crying over a journalist.
haven't, you know what I mean? Like, I can fully acknowledge that I haven't been 100% empathetic with that. And that, you know, my perspective is different. Or, I mean, not right, but I'm just saying, like, seeing this and seeing you react makes me feel like, you know, some of the dealings I've had with people on Twitter and stuff is, like, even though I disagree, is probably not empathetic enough towards the...
You don't have to be empathetic towards people who make excuses for terrorism. Stop. Don't do this. Don't cuck out to these people.
This is really sad.
This is just a very, you know, it's just one example of many. It's every life is important. Like, you know, the Israeli lives are important too. I recognize that.
He doesn't believe that, by the way.
There's no one.
He does not believe
out there that will.
I hate to
speak
tell you
out,
that.
and those who do are immediately branded as supporters of terrorism. I'm not saying you're doing that.
No.
But the reality is, when you
get on social media,
the audacity,
and you publicly make statements,
a journalist in
like
British
the DSA
media
in New
or a
York,
journalist in American
basically
media,
making a joke about people being abducted and shot by terrorists.
Whose family has been murdered.
No, it's not the same.
And to say, do you condemn the violence of Hamas when
and
you
again,
have never
yes,
asked
the British media
an Israeli
is garbage.
official if they condemn the ongoing occupation?
He
when
keeps
you turn
doing
a blind eye to it?
whataboutisms.
I'm sorry. I don't
wish
give a
Ethan
fuck
would
what,
not
like,
let
some
him get away
random
with this
person
shit.
said about land back movements being
This
violent
coward
on
was
Twitter.
on a podcast where they said there
Because
was no Israeli
one
civilians.
is the entire
They're all
state.
military targets.
One is the entire media apparatus. The other is some fucking person on Twitter.
Fucking LARPing piece of shit.
And I don't know what the full scope of their perspective is, but I can tell you I know the full scope of the perspective of mainstream media and the fucking dogs in America and the fucking violent dogs
Here we go.
in all of the European nations with the exception of Ireland that have regularly supplied weapons, turned a blind eye to the atrocities, and still to this day cynically and in the most disgusting way
just so we're
declare
clear,
that any
the
kind
West
of
has been backing
anti-Zionist
Israel
sentiment,
because
no
they
matter
don't want
who
their
speaks
hands
it,
bloodied
could be
with another
Jews,
Holocaust.
could be Arabs, could be Palestinians, could be Muslims, is anti-Semitism. It's so unimaginable. You have people in England, a woman or a man who had a Palestinian flag was seized by the authorities and was arrested. Now they're talking about possibly declaring the Palestinian flag to be a terrorist
Now be
flag.
honest as to why.
That conflation
What was that
between
guy
Hamas
doing?
and the
It wasn't just waving
Palestinians
around a
is
flag.
the policy. That is the policy that is cynically built up, propped up, and defended over and over again, so that when babies
Maybe
are dying
Europe is
in
scared
Gaza,
because they
when
allowed
children are being
millions
slaughtered in
of
Gaza,
Arab
when
immigrants into their
settlers
countries,
spit
so
on
much so that they're
West
displacing
Bank
local
Palestinians
populations.
and kill
They
them
pose a threat
and
now.
don't get punished. And as a matter of fact, the families of said victims get punished. When they're ruthlessly thrown out of their homes, you can still always turn around and justify it by either turning a blind eye to the atrocities or only covering the atrocities when there is any sort of retaliation from Hamas or from the Palestinian side in general. And then...
Still not crying. Performative clown.
And then we just say, why won't you condemn the violence? Why won't you condemn the violence? You are supporting
you can both
Hamas.
condemn the violence? How about you can condemn terrorism? How about that?
Let's.
This wasn't a revolutionary act. This was terrorism.
Okay. I win the
set
argument
back
then.
the prospects for peace 20 years, if not
I'm
more.
gonna button out that whole fucking.
Fuck me.
The whole
Performative
last part?
LARPing
Yeah, the whole last
clown.
part.
Okay.
No, I feel like I definitely understand where you're coming from. Like, I mean, I 1000% understand where you're coming from, and I do think I can acknowledge, like I touched on before, that I am capable of being more empathetic with their experience.
You don't have to be empathetic
I think
towards
you are
people
more
who justify
empathetic
terrorism.
by an incredibly wide margin in comparison to the average American. Even though there are, of course, and this does not reflect American Jewish people in general. American Jews are at the forefront of demanding the end to the occupation. The Jewish Voice for Peace, if not now, is another organization. There are wonderful friends of mine that are regularly writing about this in very thoughtful ways, and have never ceased their coverage. It's you know, it's so shitty. It's so sad. I don't know what else to say about it. Look, there was another point I wanted to make, but now I'm forgetting it.
Let's do this. Let's enjoy this video, and then I'm gonna go pee, and then we'll move on to another topic.
Okay.
Here, we never got to watch this. This is the mashup of us having a fake conversation with each other. Yeah.
5% of their targets were civilians, okay?
Did you not just see that they killed 700 people?
But it doesn't matter because they're not a fucking real military. They're disorganized, and of course there were people who did some fucked up ass shit, and civilians died as a consequence of that too.
It's war, innocent people die. All right, so let's bring the Iraqis out, Iraqi terrorist groups to your neighborhood, and see if you care. People murder everyone you love.
Of course they did that,
This
and that is
editing is
completely
crazy.
fucked up.
There's like a cut while you're talking.
They do a really well. I think they do a decent job of like at least interlacing your audio,
God.
so it actually does seem like I'm responding.
I don't know. It seems so far-fetched, but people are believing it. Pretty interesting.
This is wild.
They're saying, yeah, it's wild.
When immediately after,
But like,
the
how
internet is
fucking
cancer.
cynical is this, man? To create this.
people are saying, I support Palestine. And what they don't mean
The
Palestine,
people,
they mean
the
Hamas.
targets that they fucking killed, they're military. That's according to the Israeli
Or
numbers.
even more than Israelis, perhaps, deserve to be burned alive by terrorists.
Like, bro,
And
do you
don't-
know what life is like? Have you
Christ.
read a book? Have you, like, watched anything that isn't, like, pure Zionist copium
In fact,
propaganda?
why don't you just make it easier? Why don't you just fly to ISIS and do them a favor and just let them, you know, just serve yourself on a platter
Why
for
is
them.
Israel so violent? Why do they not actually scale it back a little bit?
Freaks. Bloodthirsty
I'm not
savage
sitting here and being
fucking
like, oh,
freaks,
that's
man.
totally justifiable. That's
They come to your neighborhood
that happens.
and they just
This
start
is
burning
crazy,
people
isn't
alive,
it?
killing people, kidnapping
This is
kids,
absolutely insane that somebody
desecrating
did
bodies.
this.
I
And the
am
first
much more
take is,
interested in
you know,
how that happened.
It's pretty fucking, I mean, props, I guess.
Like, if they had done it as a
Yeah.
joke, it'd be one thing, but to try and trick people.
I remember what I was gonna say. Okay, this is not about anything here, but it's neither here nor there. But like, you didn't know about the 2018 numbers, right? The march the March to Return.
No.
So you didn't know about that. You didn't know about Shireen Abu Akleh, and you are, despite not knowing any of that. And these are just some of the.
You don't have to know about all the atrocities to understand that what Israel is doing is wrong.
There's a reason why you don't know, even though you are empathetic and to the Palestinian plight. Okay. There's a reason why you don't know, though.
200 years of
history. And I think
history
that deserves
to
examination.
Be a human fucking
why
being.
have you never heard of this? You want to know why? Because it will never get the same level of coverage that you know, the Israeli retaliation and the justification for it gets.
To be fair, I haven't really been paying attention to the news until like very recently. But
Well, there's a lot of Americans.
But I'm not disagreeing with you. Just trying to defend my own
Chronically being
ignorance.
engaged to atrocities
I know. It's just
is exhausting. You can't expect people to be tuned in
people
all
that
the time.
are faced with this reality have an
why
empathetic,
he
a
has
more
a
empathetic
show.
approach.
It's why Hassan has a channel
rather
to begin
than
with.
turn around and say they deserved
why
it,
Ben Shapiro has
you
his own
deserve it too
stuff.
because
It's why
you're
Matt
a
Walsh
supporter
has
of
his
terrorism.
own
You're
stuff.
not doing that, of course.
Because people cannot
There are
engage
those who know about it
24/7
and
in
yet
this.
still push this line, though. But I am a firm believer that if the media was a little bit less interested in manufacturing consent and creating a justification in the
media is
minds of
interested in
Americans for
making
ethnic
money
cleansing
to
of
stay
Palestinians,
alive.
that more people
It's not
would
just about manufacturing
most
consent.
likely say this is unacceptable, completely and utterly unacceptable.
All right, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. I want to do all of this, so it might take a while if you're okay with that.
It's fine.
But I think I think that we're having a good thing happening here. So
yeah, we're solving it.
I want to keep it going. I mean, yeah. So I'll be right back. I'm just gonna go to the bathroom. Hassan, turn off his mic, please.
Yeah. I apologize for being emotional.
Performatively emotional, by the way.
This has been a long.
Not a single fucking
past
tear.
3-4 days.
Absolutely.
And there are certain stories that everyone holds on to. You know, there's always a moment that is a radicalizing moment.
Mind you, not the
for
stories
many
of
others,
children
like
being
I said,
killed,
Gabor Mate talked
not
about
stories of
his
families being
Palestinian friends who
eliminated.
could not
A
return
fucking
to their homes.
journalist.
When
fucking journalist.
Any
'Cause
Jewish
Hassan
person
is a
can just
clout
go
whore.
and live in that house, whereas those in the West Bank that have left are, by state policy, not allowed to return. I think that was his
Hassan is aware
radicalizing
of
moment.
the levels of genocide that have gone on in Africa.
I don't know.
And the
it's just-
displacements that have
it's
gone
really
on in
sad.
Africa. And the human suffering that goes on in Africa.
We didn't even talk about the
He
Canary
doesn't
Mission.
care
I want
about that
Ethan's
because
perspective
why?
on that, especially
It's black on
because
black
there are so
violence.
many organizations that operate within American boundaries inside of the United States of America that do not have the fucking smoke for Nazis and fascists and anti-Semites, that only have the smoke for random Palestinian nurses, teachers, and students. These are organizations that work to dox and threaten those who have been in support of Palestinians. And
so just so
we
we're
just
clear,
turn
it's
we just
bad
turn a
when the
blind eye
right
to
does
that
it,
completely.
but when
Most
his
people
side
don't
does
know
it,
about it, though.
perfectly
And I think that's
fine.
the reason why they turn a blind eye to
Perfectly
it.
fine.
I think it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely
More what about
ridiculous.
isms?
Same with the boycott, divestments, and sanctions movement, which was incredibly important.
By the way, there's a reason why
demanding the
BDS
end
is
of the
outlawed in a number
apartheid
of
in
states
South Africa.
because it's wrapped in a
I think that
notable level
the American
of
government has
anti-Semitism as
learned
well.
its lesson.
It's not
from that
like the BDS
former
that went on
example
for South Africa.
and has moved very swiftly
is
and very
very
efficiently
notably tied to a lot of
make it
anti-Semitism.
virtually impossible to coexist or have a job and keep a job while simultaneously holding the position that you can defend Palestinians and demand a boycott, divestment, and sanctions from the state of Israel.
Do you know why it is that that like I have to imagine that those laws that are on the books in 35 states about making it illegal to support BDS have been challenged by some groups on First Amendment grounds. Like how has that not gone to the Supreme Court yet, or has it?
The ADL defends those laws.
It just seems so blatantly not.
ADL defends those laws, by the way.
I think Abby Martin was one of the people that challenged it and won, but ultimately it still exists in, like I said, in most in a lot of states.
35 is most.
The
yeah.
ADL.
It just I don't know. I guess I don't know what the status of any fights over that is, but it just seems so on its face unconstitutional. I'm shocked that so many states have been able to pass that.
Jerusalem Post posted this today over this stupid fucking debate, but they said the Jerusalem Post can now confirm on verified photos of the bodies that reports of babies being burnt and decapitated in Hamas's assault on Kfar Aza, the kibbutz, are correct.
Keep excusing this.
And
that was come on. Come on.
God. There was
Come on,
a lot of
this.
fucking people being like, for some reason,
See, he
they're like,
doesn't care.
Hamas would
He does
never
not
do
care.
that.
I don't
They
think
would
people
only slaughter 1,500 people. They would only shoot a baby with an AK-47, as if that's not more as brutal.
I said this yesterday. I talked about this quite a bit. I think that the coverage of this has been ridiculous.
Oh, come
like
on.
the fact that first of all, the fact that it was not verified until now is insane to me. And the fact that it got all the way to the president, who said I saw the photos when he had not seen
Not
it
verified.
and just
It
repeated
took them
is
for
wild.
24 hours to get
Like,
into some communities, and they had to
ultimately,
fight
it
out
doesn't matter
militants.
what
You fucking moron.
method of execution occurred when children were slaughtered, when babies were slaughtered. It literally doesn't matter.
Well, that's why I always thought it was so silly when I would see leftists being like, they didn't rape anyone or decapitate any babies. It's like, I guess they're cool then. I guess they're cool.
Shot them.
Yeah, they're cool.
It does.
But they did
actually.
actually.
Seem kind of moot.
No,
but Hamas.
This is why this conversation is frivolous, and I mentioned it time and time again yesterday.
Rape,
that like, okay,
decapitation,
the babies were not
burning
decapitated,
alive.
or they were,
Yep.
but they're still killed.
Inconsequential.
So, it is silly. It's silly to
Inconsequential.
have a back and forth on this. However,
silly.
The only reason as to why the only reason as to why the
This is the
assessment
American
should
left,
be made
by the way.
later down the line on how quickly information that is not verified yet can spread all the way to the highest
That happens
levels of
all
government
the time.
and what that
All
serves,
the
what
time.
purpose that
It
serves.
even happens
that
during
part,
Black
that
Lives
part
Matter
needs a
riots.
close examination, especially considering
all the false
prior
things that
instances
leftists
where,
came out about cops shooting
not that
unarmed
it
black
matters.
people.
Again,
I mean, it was true.
It is true.
Yeah.
And it was ruthless. And it was brutal.
It is fucking ruthless,
and this is
man.
something that needs to be this is something that of course needs to be considered.
That is I
the
mean,
reason why people were
Leftists
the reason
in America
why a lot of people,
don't
at least
care
I
about
follow,
this and try to minimize
who
this
have,
because this is the
who
level
have
of
been
violence they want in
covering
America.
this on the ground inside of Israel, and some inside
These
of
are
Gaza
the people
as
that
well,
should be on no-fly lists
was
permanently.
because of the Kuwait baby incubator situation that occurred in the past, where Amnesty International and the American authorities in the lead up to Operation Desert Storm said that the Iraqi soldiers were taking babies out of their incubators and like tossing them
And Joe
like
Biden
killing them,
on film
which is like
perpetuated this,
incredibly
by the
brutal,
way.
right? In that circumstance, that was completely not real. That had not happened at all. And Amnesty International went in and looked at it, and there was even an eyewitness testimony that was offered in Congress that was just a complete falsehood, a complete fabrication, and that played a role in justifying it to Americans that like we have to invade. And I think that's the reason why, because the American government has done this before. I think that's the reason why
All
people thought
governments
that
do
this was the
by the
exact
way.
same situation.
All
However,
of
it
them.
wasn't the exact same situation because the baby incubator story was false, whereas babies were still killed in this circumstance. So it's not
matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
But the truth is, though, that this is not going to help anything.
And-
This is going to be.
This is
is
going
gonna
to
fuel
set
a lot
things
of
back so badly.
a lot of bad feelings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is
This being
bad.
true.
And here's the thing, right? Like even if those babies weren't beheaded, let's say, right, or they weren't decapitated, whether by
gonna minimize
gunfire
this,
or
by the
directly
way.
with knives or whatever, which is I can't believe we're having this conversation. It's so fucking ridiculous. Okay, they still died. It's not like the Israeli government was going to do anything different. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, or it's
God.
not like the people that are
minimizing
receiving
this?
this information were going to feel differently. Like the goal there
So
is only
if when
the goal
Israel
there
goes
is
and
to-
does their
is
ground
to
assault in
absolutely
Gaza,
demand
the
verification
IDF troops
because you have to do that.
go in there and
because
behead
in the
children
fog of war there is
and
so
rape
much misinformation
women.
that gets presented.
will he have the same idea that
and
this is
and
just
the
silly?
media should do their fucking jobs 100%. And
Well, it's different
uh,
because they're an
and
occupying force.
I do have criticisms on that front, but it's ridiculous to have a constant back and forth on this when nothing will change and nothing's going to bring those children back.
All right, here's what I want to do. I'm going to move on in the interest of fairness, because part of what I want to do today is call out some really fucking nasty shit I've seen, but and because I want to be consistent and do it all around, and these people are just as deserving, if not more, to be called out. I have a compilation of all the really fucked up shit that Western politicians.
Get ready for this.
Mostly politicians. Some here, like this guy. I mean, this is a rally. You know, this is a pro-Israel protest in New York. I mean, just listen to what this guy has to say.
To my dick!
What do you think the response should be from Netanyahu and the military to Gaza?
Kill all Palestinians! All of them! Now,
So, like, that's crazy, obviously. Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's barbaric.
Just say that on camera.
But
yeah.
I mean, why would
there is a level of comfort in saying that, more so than saying
kill all Israelis,
yeah,
kill all Jews. Yeah, of course.
There's definitely way more acceptable
no
thing to say.
hesitation there, right into the
somehow.
camera.
Yeah.
No mask.
His face is there. He's
the
probably
thing
got
is,
a
why
job.
would he say that? Is that might be a Kahanis flag? I think too, the one that he's putting up.
one left from the river to the sea.
I can't see.
Will be deceased. And Israel need to do like this.
Oh, and then this whole
No.
shit. Yeah, I've heard this a million times. But anyway, so that was one. I just want to blast through these.
The flag that I think he's waving is a Kahanis flag,
and highlight them.
which is of course
not the mass number of protesters that aren't calling for the eradication of
psychopathic
Palestinians
terrorist cult
or turning Palestine into a fucking
led
parking lot.
led by the insane Meir Kahan, the rabbi, which Itamar Ben-Gvir is a part of his cult and is a defender of.
Here is Lindsey Graham, the fucking beast.
By the way, that's a terrorist organization by American standards. Literally, America has declared that to be a terror organization, as a terrorist organization by Israeli standards as well, and that is the reason why Itamar Ben-Gvir was not allowed to serve in the IDF. So remember that, like, you know, no matter how conservative or no matter how ultra Zionist you might be, even Israeli conservatives are like, that's too far, that's too fucked up. Now that guy runs the police force, and Benjamin Netanyahu gave him a Praetorian Guard, or said it offered him concessions on building out a Praetorian Guard specifically for him.
Netanyahu's going to be remembered like the man. He wanted this legacy of being Israel's protector Hitler. So bad. He served for what, like 13 years? People are going to spit on his fucking grave, dude. Anyway, here's Lindsey Graham on Fox News, international news, the most popular news show in America, I think.
We're in a religious war here. I am with Israel. Do whatever the hell you have to do to defend yourself. Level the place.
Mind you, Lindsey Graham said this about Saudi Arabia. He said this about Iraq.
The first guy that we showed, and
all
what
of his donors.
he's
They're
saying
all military
is
contract
also
companies.
Exactly what's
It's
going
not
on in Gaza.
that
So
Lindsey
that is
Graham
why
say
I
this,
always
'cause
say
he's a
there is no
piece of
equivalence
shit.
here. Like there is
Just
no
as much. And
there is no power or no like serious no genuine voice that is channeling this kind of wanton indifference and this kind of like callous celebration of like genociding all Jewish people, which is completely unjustifiable, of course.
You have heads of Arabic states that call for the elimination of Jews. What?
There's no equivalent on the Palestinian side.
You're right. You're right.
And it's not represented in the media or reflected in any way at all.
No, as Palestinians, no,
I understand
probably
what
not.
you're saying. And the crazy
PLO
thing here is
probably
that
doesn't
these people are
anymore.
posting it on their social media.
But-
This is Nikki Haley posted this on her YouTube. Lindsey Graham posted that clip. That motherfucker clipped that because he
posted it himself.
Right? He posted that on Twitter.
Yeah, that's so crazy.
It's not just Republicans, by the way. Democrats
This
have
is
said
the worst I've
similar.
found.
Democrats have said similar things as well. I mean, what's his name from the Problem Solvers Caucus? Gottheimer, Josh Gottheimer.
You know what? Maybe we should get money out of American politics
and he
because
could be heard screaming
some
that
of the
like
biggest lobbyists
all Muslims
in Washington.
That's a Democrat. Here, I'll show you. I'll read.
Meanwhile, here, let me play this Nikki Haley video. Message to Netanyahu.
And what we have to understand is this is the reason that we have to unite around making sure our enemies do not hurt our...
I do have to say, also looking at this, it strikes me as a little bit silly that they're showing, oh, God damn it, it's so fucking slow, that they're showing like a, you know, essentially a hole in the ground as evidence for, you know, the damage, the damage that Hamas has done, versus like the shots of Gaza where like literally entire city blocks are demolished. It does strike me as a little fucking goofy.
Sure our enemies do not hurt our friends. America can never be so arrogant to think we don't need friends, just like we needed them on 9/11. That's why Ukraine needs us when Russia's doing this. That's why Israel needs us when...
There's like some playground politics.
That is the most
you need
disgusting.
Friends.
That is the most
need
disgusting
friends.
comparison. Like the fact that every fucking Ukrainian official has come out and been like, wow, what Palestinians are doing is exactly what the Russians are doing to Ukraine is so fucking, oh my God, I don't even want to get into it. Okay, I don't
Let me
even wanna
finish
talk
this
about
video.
that.
Yeah.
Dogs.
Hamas and Iran are doing
Mind
this,
you, there's
and
a
I'll
reason
say
why
this
the Ukrainians
to
are doing
Prime
that.
Minister Netanyahu, finish them.
Who's giving them
finish
arms?
them. Hamas did this,
You
you
might
know.
reduce the
I mean,
amount of
that's
arms they're
fucking
getting
crazy.
if
And
Israel gets
I mean,
in an open conflict
again, the
with their
result of
neighbors.
this shit, of these terrorist
Ukraine
attacks,
is
is
scared.
basically, you know, the world, the Western world, being like, here's your blank check to kill as many fucking Palestinians as you want.
It's so 9/11 again. It's so scary.
Yep.
It's
Hamas got exactly what they wanted.
This only works when only one side of the conflict gets coverage in the eyes of the American population. They would do this on Fox regardless.
We live in an age
it only works
where you
because
can
of
literally watch the bombing of Gaza 24/7.
insanely,
There is no excuse anymore. It's
sentiment
not
that
that
is
we're
just
dealing
so
with one or
commonplace
two media
since,
companies that
the
control
post-9/11
all of the
universe
narrative.
that we exist
You
in.
have an obligation to go out and get information
not only
yourself.
that,
There are a number of sources you
but
can
also
go and see
that's
the
why
suffering
the
going on
conflation of
right
Palestinians
now.
and Hamas is
There is
one
no
that is by
excuse
design
anymore.
because the victims are still the Palestinians, not Hamas, and there is no way to effectively
Palestinians are a victim of both
or destroy
Hamas
Hamas
and Israel. They are being double
with
fucked.
an endless
They are
bombing
being
campaign in Gaza.
exploited.
The only way to destroy the influence that Hamas has is by starving it out. And I don't mean literally by starving the entire Gaza Strip. Starving Hamas and ridding it of its influence requires you to treat Palestinians with dignity.
The problem
and
is,
offer them equality.
You can
and,
offer
and,
the Palestinians
and
equality,
follow
but it's not
through
going to be
on
enough.
The former
It's not
promises
gonna
that
be
the
enough.
international
There is
community has
too
made and
much
turned a blind
distrust
eye
and
to,
blood going on
to
right
Israel
now,
not following
especially
their
with what
commitments.
Hamas has
Fully,
done.
agree
You're
with
not
what
going to
you
get
said.
there.
Like,
This
again,
fucked things
it's
up
important
really badly. And
everyone to
Netanyahu
acknowledge that
knew this.
Hamas
And I hate
is
to tell you, it sounds
the result
conspiratorial. I really believe that piece of shit let this happen.
You know, Israel's treatment of the Palestinians, and it's just, you're right. If you I think it's obvious, but I guess people don't want to confront it. But the obvious solution is to don't give them a reason to turn to terrorists. You know, pretty obvious. But there it is. Here's Marco Rubio. There can be no ceasefire, negotiated solutions, or peaceful coexistence with depraved barbarians who murder teenage girls, children, the elderly, and then dump them in the streets of Gaza so bloodthirsty crowds
This is a
can
man who
desecrate
looked
their
at
bodies.
children that were
It must be
victims of a mass shooting
eradicated,
and said, "I
and
will
Israel
do
must
nothing about
respond
controlling
disproportionately
weapons of war on American
in all
streets."
caps
This guy is a piece of
to this
shit.
and any future attacks from them. I mean, what he's doing here is like the Hamas murderers are 1,000% barbarians who murdered children, teenage girls, which specifically he has a problem with. He goes, who murdered teenage girls? What about teenage boys? We don't care about them? Just like, it's a weird focus. What, right? Anytime,
a little odd.
Anytime you call out teenage girls in any context, I'm going to raise an eyebrow.
Check his hard drive.
He just likes them, you know.
Yeah. By the way,
But to finish my point, he was saying he's conflating Hamas, who are bloodthirsty murderers, to justify killing Palestinians disproportionately. And again, like, I don't know if they, like, the videos that I saw that made me emotional before of the Palestinian dad, you know, with his daughter, holding her like this, like she was like gray and fucking dead, like an 8-month-old baby.
Yeah.
Like a beautiful newborn, innocent, beautiful child. Like, I don't know if and he's this man. I don't know if Marco Rubio
send the video to Marco
has ever
Rubio.
seen anything like that, or if it would change him. But I can't imagine that seeing that would not have an impact on these
Rubio's
fucking ghouls to see what they're
matter more to
actually
him.
wishing for.
It might not be impactful for Marco Rubio, but it certainly would be impactful for many people who are completely oblivious to what's going on, which is precisely the reason why that never gets any coverage. This isn't to say that like Israeli civilian casualties are acceptable or good. It's just that there is coverage on that endlessly, understandably,
really wish
and never any
Ethan
coverage on
knew about the
the
podcast
humanity
that
of
Hassan was
Gazans.
on.
I've talked about another aspect of this too. We in the Western world live in the comfort of the imperial core, and we live in a comfortable security blanket. So for us, if we live in like Connecticut or Iowa or whatever, of course we empathize significantly more with Israelis that were attacked by this horde of scary Muslims. Like, of course we empathize with that on a spiritual level because we can't understand the entire building blocks being removed. It is far too alien for us to comprehend the fear and the reality of that kind of devastation. We look at that and we go, oh, this is just like Baghdad, you know, which is an enemy that deserved it in the minds of Americans. So that is also another reason why I think Americans are immediately and unconditionally in support of, you know, the Israeli occupation.
Here's Ben Shapiro. I mean, no surprise here, obviously, but still.
Oh, he's been baying for blood nonstop.
I mean, here's a video. The UN Special Reporter for Human Rights in Palestine. We are horrified by what's happening, and we are calling for a truce. And here's a video of, you know, Gaza being bombed by missiles. And then Ben, in his infinite empathy and human nature, told them that they can fuck right off. And, like, this is such, all these people, but looking at Ben, I mean, is such a lack of human empathy. It's like, it's just fucking evil, man. But there it is. That's Benny Boy. And one more, again, no surprises here, but Charlie Kirk.
These people betray principles of Judaism and centuries of Jewish history of always siding with those who have been oppressed, always being at the forefront of social justice and fighting for emancipation for all people. It's really, really, really disgusting to see that. 100%.
I didn't want to read this one. So, basically, showing all these ghouls feeling very comfortable with no pushback, expressing their desire for genocide in Western media. Here is an Israeli. Hold on, who said this? Okay, so here it is in Hebrew. This was from an unnamed defense official told Israel's Channel 13 that the Palestinian territory, home to more 2 million residents, would be reduced to rubble. Quote, Gaza will eventually turn into a city of tents. There will be no buildings. The ground maneuver will surprise Hamas, the official said in a stark warning to the terrorist group behind the weekend assault that killed more than 1,200 Israelis.
I mean, the Israeli defense minister literally said, we're shutting off the electricity, we're shutting off the food supply.
I don't understand
And we're
that.
shutting off the water into Gaza because we're fighting human animals, or a better translation, I think, was beasts. But ultimately, though, that's collective punishment. It is a violation of the Geneva Suggestions. I don't want to call it conventions. This has happened for far too long. You can't attack the press. You can't attack, medics. They killed. There was the Red Crescent guy who was crying in his ambulance because he could not. He had seen far too much death and destruction, and a couple hours later, he got bombed. They allowed him to enter a site of the rubble, a site of the bombings, and they bombed him and killed him. Like a couple hours later.
Okay, so
directly just a violation.
At this time, I want to turn my attention to some of the very evil takes I've heard some prominent folks making about Israelis.
Sorry about that.
Here is one such example of a dude, and this guy is very popular. He has 1.6 million subscribers. He is a very popular political YouTuber
I can't see anything.
called Second Thought. Sorry, this.
Here you go.
Here you go. JT.
All right, well,
Here's
then
your boy.
You tell me what you think about this. He said, "What's going on in occupied Palestine is unprecedented. No doubt we'll have wall."
Is it on? Wait, hold on. I don't have my glasses today.
It's just the.
I'm not
text is
gonna be
really
able to
fucked.
see it. I just had to click on it so I can read it.
Avoiding.
But go ahead. You can read it out. You can read it out loud.
Here, you know what? Let me show you this.
Is it
video.
on the Google Doc?
Let me show you the video first. This will be easier for you. He basically says the same thing here. So here he is doing a podcast.
I've been on. I think is this
Hassan's
the program?
on this
I've been on the
podcast.
podcast.
I don't know what it's called,
And
but
said
this
nothing.
is just a clip from
Yeah.
So here's his take on this, and let's listen.
And Faz also very much. He says, did the Palestinians actually take civilian hostage, or is that fake news? I don't care.
Yeah, the occupiers
I don't,
are not civilian.
First of all, just straight off the bat,
The person that's talking is Hakim. He is a doctor in Iraq, and of course, just to put this into a decent frame of reference
Here he
for those
goes. He's gonna excuse
who
us.
are unfamiliar, I think he will probably have a much more ruthless position on the matter, considering how he feels about American forces and what they've done to his
this
home
I'm pretty
and
sure is
family.
all Second Thought.
No, the one who said.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Here.
And Faz also very much. He says, did the Palestinians actually take civilian hostage, or is that fake news?
So wait, who's talking there?
That's Hakim.
Okay, so Second Thought's the one who says, "I don't care," and laughs.
Wait, say it.
I don't care.
This
No,
guy.
that's Hakim.
I don't.
The guy with the accent.
Yeah, that's Hakim. Second Thought is an American.
So Second Thought is the guy who's asking the question.
No, Hakim is the one who read it. He's reading it from chat. It's a
Thank you
super
very much.
chat.
Did the Palestinians actually take civilian hostage, or is that fake news? I don't care.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, he agrees with him. So let's just fucking listen
go
to
on.
the clip.
The occupiers
I don't-
are not civilians. That is what it comes down to. Like if imagine
Hassan was on
like
this
if-
podcast and said nothing.
Germany, let's say Germany to be non.
That's him, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Controversial.
And not that it matters.
invaded the United States, and they,
It doesn't
they said,
matter,
you know what?
by the way.
Cincinnati, Ohio, is our ancestral home, and everyone knows that's blatantly false. But they take your home, they murder your grandma, they bulldoze like your neighbor's house. Are those people civilians there? No, they're occupiers, and those are criminals. That is, there are no civilians there. And
according
There are
to
no
Second Thought,
civilians.
he says that every Israeli is an occupier, and there are no citizens there. In response to decapitating
there are
babies,
two
which I can now say.
There are two different schools of thought here.
Here
So,
he goes. He's gonna excuse
The
this.
first is
And the take in the
19
comments is
Has
based.
to defend his
the
buddies.
Yeah, of course. The 1948ers
Of course.
believe that there's two different schools of thought within, I would say, anti-Zionism. Those who believe that all matter of settlements that were propped up even in the inception of the Israeli nation state are unjustifiable,
excuses for
and
this.
that they
He
are
was sitting on that
settlers,
couch
that,
and
so
said
they
nothing.
extend beyond
By the way,
your
Hassan
perspective
doesn't
that
think
you
that
agree with,
civilian
which is
casualties
West
are
Bank
bad.
is a settler occupation.
I think it's an extremely evil thing to say. What he said.
Let me ask you this.
No. What do you think? What he said is evil?
I think it is
No, he
one,
doesn't.
unproductive, and two, it does not meet the realities on the ground, and it's not a viable solution.
Obfuscating.
So calling, just to be clear, calling babies.
No, of course not.
Settlers.
Of course.
Hold
of
on.
course
They're not even living.
They're
on-
not.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
they're
okay.
babies.
So I
Now,
just want to
listen,
say,
listen.
I just
I
want
have a
to
question
say
for you. I have a
that this
question for
guy's
you.
a fucking evil piece of shit for saying that.
Can I ask you a question?
Can I finish? Let me finish the
Okay,
video.
we'll finish this, but I do
Yeah,
have a question for you because I think you're going to agree with something I'm about to say.
Yes. Let's just finish it and then we'll talk.
Invaded the United States, and they said, you know what, Cincinnati, Ohio is our ancestral home, and everyone knows that's blatantly false.
I gotta
But
go take care of some real world
take your
things.
home,
Real
they
world
murder your
things. So
grandma,
enjoy
they
Hassan making
bulldoze, like, your
excuses for
neighbor's
his
house.
commie buddies.
Are those people civilians
Hold
there?
on.
No, they're occupiers, and those